I'd like to invite everyone to our June board meeting, June 9th, 2020, for our public session. The first thing I'd like to do is take roll of our board members, as we have some that are working with us remotely and some that are here at the board office. So if you would answer as being present when I call your name. Rodney Gottelty?
Present.
Matthew Paul?
Present.
Monica Rinker?
Present.
Charlotte Cole?
Present.
And we also have remotely with us, I think, Ms. Gore.
Present.
Okay, we would like to start off, first of all, by rising and taking a moment of silence. And certainly this is one of the more unusual times in our nation's history, with a pandemic going one direction and a lot of civil unrest going in other directions. So I certainly hope that you would, in your moment of silence, pray for our country or ask for help in some fashion for our country. So if you please rise for a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice.
Thank you. Before proceeding with our agenda, we're going to take a moment to unfortunately say goodbye to our student member to the board, Katie Catulli. Katie has been a member on our board for the last 2 years and has done an incredible job and is an incredible student. As a graduate of Southern High School now, I shouldn't say graduating, she is a graduate. Katie will leave us this summer and move on to Harvard University, which is, that in itself is an incredible accomplishment. But I can say that in my 3.5 years on the board, we've had 2 young ladies who have both been outstanding. Cheyenne Tichenal, who also was an outstanding member, was followed by Katie, who was equally outstanding. We have enjoyed tremendously, Katie, being a part of your life once a month, sometimes 2 times a month. But you have been a valued addition with your comments, your insight, the things that you've brought to us. And it's very bittersweet when we say goodbye to you, but we're all anxious to follow you because you're a shining star that's going to be someone special in the world someday. So it's been our pleasure, and I'll let you say a couple comments, and then we have a special gift for you that we'd like to share as well.
Thank you so much. This opportunity has just been so it's influenced how I perceive things and the educational system, but also how government works. And hopefully I came on this board because I really wanted to represent the students' voice, and hopefully I've helped influence or made an impact. But I know that equally as important, I've learned so much from this experience, and I've loved working alongside each and every one of you, and thank you so much for this, for believing in me and choosing me 2 years ago.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, and because of the things that are going on, we all can't give you a hug and tell you how much we appreciate you and all those things. But we do have a gift. I asked the superintendent to share the gift with you, and then we'll get a picture of everyone with you as we say goodbye to you this month.
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you.
Sure, we'd like for you to open it. We want to see it.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm going to read all of these later so I don't start crying.
There we go.
Thank you.
From all of me and all of the board members.
Thank
And
you.
you can go ahead and keep opening, and then I want you to introduce your dad.
Sure. I love it. Oh my goodness.
I wasn't the picker outer.
Thank you. Oh, it's so pretty.
You'll be the best dressed, best tagged Harvard girl.
Oh, definitely. I will use this all the time. Thank you.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Kate, you'd like to introduce your father who came with you?
So this is my dad, Papa Tilly.
Meet everybody. Thank you so much for letting her do this. She's loved it. So
Thank you
Absolutely.
so much for lending her to us. I mean, we're the recipients.
well, thanks. All right.
Thank you, thanks for coming.
Yes, go ahead, sure.
I really valued all that you brought to the table.
Thank
You
you.
listened, you come prepared, you had a lot of questions, very valuable questions, give us insight to a student. And when you brought information, you did Southern and Northern, middle school and high school. So, and I liked it when our meetings will go over late, and we say, you can leave now, it's okay, because it's getting late, we think you might have a test tomorrow, homework. You'd be like, it's okay, and that's wonderful, that's amazing. You was very dedicated
Thank you.
to it, but we will miss you.
I think, when I think about you, Katie, you really, understood who you were here for, and you represented those people to the best of your ability, and you didn't just take it very lightly. People would give you questions, comments, and when you gave your report, other than the fact that, you told about the activities, which is good, you also spent time asking us those questions or getting information for your fellow students, that you always knew that that's who you represented. And I think that's very important for a person on a board, is to have that concern for who they represent. You did a very nice job.
Thank you.
Mr. Hoover would like to make a comment as well.
I thought you did a great job. You always spoke up and you always asked the tough question. So I think you're well set. Again, you're
Mr. Glotfelty, Mr. Paul, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, I have a couple. My biggest regret for not being there tonight in person is not being able to say goodbye to you in person, Katie. You've really been really an outstanding member of the board the year and a half I've been on, and I'm sure the whole time you were there. And you've got an incredible future ahead of you, and we certainly all wish you the best. I really appreciated your insightful comments. Almost at every meeting, you were on top of things. So good luck in the future, and I know you're going to be doing some great things.
Going last is always hard, but I'll echo what everybody else said, and I really appreciate your time on the board and being able to serve with you, and your questions and your comments were always great, and I wish you the best as you go forward in your future.
Thank you. Okay, so all of us all with our masks on so that we are doing this correctly. If I could ask, you guys put your masks on at home too, okay?
Yeah.
We're doing this right.
Wear masks.
Mask on.
Okay.
Katie,
Want to use get the phone to Jim.
did you leave?
Yeah.
Rodney, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
What's all this noise coming over?
I don't know. That's not me.
Yeah, me either.
I had a question for Katie.
I'm not sure.
You can't talk now, we're doing a pit. You're right.
You'll have to Photoshop us in Matt and I.
That's a live conference, guys.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Her dad, to hear about all of your experiences with Parker. So excited.
Hey, Dawn, why don't you get one with her dad? Oh, yeah, okay. Perfect.
Perfect, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, boy, you like him, but.
Yeah.
How's that?
My boys didn't take after me either.
Oh, I
Yeah.
quite a bit.
Okay, with
Can I-
everything, was that pleasant? Yes, Rodney, yes.
Is Katie still there?
Yes, she is. Of course, we got a meeting. What do you mean?
Yeah. I've got a question for you. Did your mother teach up at Northern Middle at one time?
A while ago.
Yeah, so when I told my sons that I was serving on the board with you, you were a student representative, they said, "Oh, we had her mother. She was a great teacher."
Oh,
So you can tell her that they're on Elliott said hello.
I will.
They've turned out okay too, so.
Okay.
I said they've turned out pretty well also, Mr. Gluckfeld.
Thank you.
All right, we ready?
Okay, I think we are ready to move on. The next, order of business is the approval of the agenda. It is an action item, so I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda.
Approved.
A motion by, Monica to approve. Second, second by Rodney. Those in favor of accepting the agenda, signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. And the motion does carry. The approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda. This is
Okay,
Matt.
Matthew makes a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Rodney, I'll second.
Rodney, seconds. For the approval of the consent agenda, those in favor of the approval, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And the consent agenda is approved. We'll move on to the May 12th, 2020 public session minutes. I'll give you a second to look at those if you need to reacquaint yourself with them, if there are any additions, corrections. It's quite lengthy, so I don't know if anybody has anything or not.
We're doing May 12th, right, Tom? Or
Yes,
May-
we are.
Okay.
May 12th.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Paul, to
Yep.
approve, the minutes. Second? Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, we got one from Charlotte.
Let her.
All those in favor of accepting the minutes from May 12th, 2020, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right.
Those opposed, nay. And it is 4-0 aye. Approval of the May 27th, 2020 public session minutes. Takes a couple minutes or a minute or so to look at those. If there were any changes, additions, or corrections that you noted?
I make a motion to approve. Matt?
Motion by Dr. Paul to approve the second. Second by Monica. Those in favor of accepting the May 27th, 2020 minutes, signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. And the ayes have 4 votes. I'll now turn it over to the superintendent for closed session summaries and announcements.
Okay, thank you. Closed session summary for May 12, 2020 Board of Education meeting. The Board of Education met in executive session on Tuesday, May 12th, 4:20 p.m. under 33-35, General Provisions article of the Annotated Code of Maryland to discuss the following items. Review of executive session minutes, personnel topics pursuant to 3-305B1, negotiation topics pursuant to 3-305B9, and administrative function topics. The meeting was conducted via video conference, COVID-19 pandemic, and the governor's executive order prohibiting. Mr. Tom Woods, board president, took attendance at the meeting and ascertained the board members were meeting in private and that no one was in the room with them. Mrs. Rinker made a motion to close the meeting, and Mrs. Siebold did the motion. Thereafter, the board unanimously voted to close the session with a yea vote from Rodney Glotfeld, Monica Rinker, Matthew Paul, and Charlotte Siebold. The topics discussed in the closed session included the following: review of the April 14, 2020 executive session minutes. Rodney Glotfeld made a motion to accept the minutes, and Matthew Paul seconded the motion. Final resolution, motion carried. Yea votes from Monica Rinker, Rodney Glotfeld, Charlotte Siebold, and Matthew Paul. Personnel. Student member of the board for FY 2020-2021, Mrs. Stephanie Wazlowski, Supervisor of English Language Arts and Social Studies, introduced the FY 2021 new student member of the board to the board members. Both individuals joined the meeting via video conference. Garrett Miller was selected as a student member of the board for FY 2020-2021 and will be a senior at Southern Garrett High School. Professional leave request, Ms. Karen DeVore, Executive Director of Curriculum Instruction Administration, presented a professional leave form. Request for a staff member to attend Power School University. Mr. Rodney Glotfeld made a motion to approve the PLF request, and Matthew Paul seconded the motion. Final resolution, motion carried with yea votes from Monica Rinker, Rodney Glotfeld, Charlotte Siebold, and Matthew Paul. Certificated staffing recommendations, Dr. Jane Willison, Director of Human Resources and Employee Relations, presented certificated staffing recommendations to the board. The board voted on the certificated recommendations under the consent agenda in public session. Personnel update, Dr. Willison provided an update on personnel matters. The board did not take action on these matters. Superintendent goals, Mrs. Barbara Baker, Superintendent, provided an update report to the board. However, due to time constraints, the board was not able to discuss the topic. They will move this topic to the next board meeting. Negotiations, healthcare update. Dr. Willison and Mrs. Allison Schweitzer, Director of Finance, provided an update on healthcare recommendations. Salary parameters, Dr. Willison and Mrs. Schweitzer shared proposed negotiated agreements for various bargaining groups and proposed language changes for the negotiations. The board took action on this topic in the public session under the consent agenda. Administrative function, the board discussed various administrative function topics. The board considered these topics but did not take any action on these items. Recess and adjournment, the executive session was recessed at 6:47 p.m. so that the board could reconvene the public session. The board returned to executive session at 10:50 p.m. to continue discussions regarding administrative function topics. Charlotte Siebold made a motion to adjourn executive session, and Monica Rinker seconded the motion. The board adjourned the executive session at 11:51 p.m. Mr. Tom Woods, board president, Mrs. Monica Rinker, board vice president, Mrs. Charlotte Siebold, board member, Ms. Barbara Baker, superintendent, Mr. Brandon Hoover, board attorney, and Mrs. Karen Brewer, executive assistant to the superintendent, joined the meeting via video conference at the central office. Mr. Rodney Glotfeld, board member, Dr. Matthew Paul, board member, Mrs. Karen DeVore, executive director of Curriculum Instruction Administration, Ms. Stephanie Wazlowski, supervisor of English Language Arts and Social Studies, Mr. Garrett Miller, student member of the board for FY 2021, attended the meeting remotely via video conference. Mrs. Allison Schweitzer, Director of Finance, Dr. Jane Willison, Director of Human Resources, and Mr. Richard Wazlowski, Director of Maintenance, Operations, Facilities, and Transportation, attended part of the meeting via video conference at Central Office. Closed session summaries for the May 23rd, 2020 board meeting. The Board of Education met in executive session on Tuesday, May 27th, 2020 at 4:18 p.m. under Authority 3-305 of the General Provisions article of the Annotated Code of Maryland to discuss the following items: negotiations topics pursuant to 3-305B9 and administrative function topics. The meeting was conducted via video conference due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the governor's executive order prohibiting public gatherings. Monica Rinker made a motion to close the meeting, and Charlotte Siebold seconded the motion. Thereafter, the board unanimously voted to close the session with a yea vote from Rodney Glotfeld, Monica Rinker, Matthew Paul, and Charlotte Siebold. The topics discussed in the closed session include the following: negotiations, healthcare update. Dr. Willison and Mrs. Allison Schweitzer, Director of Finance, provided an update on healthcare recommendations. Salary parameters, Dr. Wilson and Mrs. Schweitzer shared tentative negotiated agreements for all 4 bargaining groups as well as the corresponding salary scales for negotiation. The board did not take action on these topics. Administrative function, the board discussed various administration function topics. The board considered these topics but did not take any action on these items. Adjournment. Charlotte Seabold made a motion to adjourn the executive session and Monica Rinker seconded the motion. The board adjourned executive session at 5:18 p.m. Mr. Tom Woods, Board President, Mrs. Monica Rinker, Board Vice President, Mrs. Charlotte Seabold, Board Member, Ms. Barbara Baker, Superintendent, Mr. Brandon Hoover, Board Attorney, Mrs. Karen Brewer, Executive Assistant Superintendent, joined the meeting via video conference at Central Office. Mr. Rodney Glopfeldy, Board Member, Dr. Matthew Paul, Board Member, Mrs. Karen DeVore, Executive Director of Curriculum Instruction Administration, joined the video conference remotely. Mrs. Allison Schweitzer, Director of Finance, Dr. Jane Wilson, Director of Human Resources, Mr. Richard Wozlowski, Director of Maintenance, Operations, Facilities, and Transportation, and Mr. Paul Edwards, Director of Secondary Education, attended part of the meeting via video conference. That was the end. Thankfully, I have come to the end of that particular point. All right, so as far as the announcements go, the big ones, June 11th, day after tomorrow, I believe, is the last day for students for the very unusual 2019 and 20 school year. June 12th, I'm sure they will be pleased as well, is the last day for teachers. On June 8th, there is a Mays Virtual Board Service Academy regarding the Kerwin Regional Academy is the name of it. On June 23rd, we will be having a special Board of Education meeting. We'll be meeting an executive session from 4 to 6 p.m. and public session at 6 p.m. And I want to let the public know that we are still operating with a limited staff at Central Office, but we will be closed the majority of Fridays, beginning with this Friday, and will be, when we are reopened permanent, for the summer, will be a 7 a.m. to 4:30 work day. But all Central offices and schools will be closed on Fridays during that time frame. And there will be information on our website, and we'll have a posted on the doors our hours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have a public comment. We did receive some email public comments, and so we're not doing public comment live in the board office due to the constraints in which we're working. The Garrett County Board of Education is pleased to receive comments and ideas from our public pertaining to the policies, procedures, and/or practices of the school system. We ask that comments be limited to a maximum time of 3 minutes per individual, unless otherwise considered by the board president. There will be no discussion or action at this meeting, but may be considered at a future meeting. Issues that are specific to individual employees should be referred to the immediate supervisor for appropriate consideration and review. Rude, slanderous, or threatening remarks or other behavior that is disruptive or interferes with the order of the meeting will not be permitted. The first public comment I have is from Sharon Miller. First off, I want to say thank you, and that I appreciate all of you addressed above in this email. Our teachers, staff, and board members who have worked so hard and gone the extra mile to further our children's education during this pandemic. Please review and possibly revise the fourth quarter elementary school grading so that our county's elementary children who have completed and turned in their assignments can have a letter grade on their report card versus a C19-0 for the 2019-2020 school year. As a parent, I have a concern that our elementary fourth quarter grading with a C19-0 is not in the best interest, is not the best that we can do for our children who have worked so hard and completed their assignments, whether packet or online. I understand this pandemic has not been easy on our teachers, children, and parents, but we are the leaders who our children look up to, and we must remain strong role models and not let down our high professional standards and values. Children require feedback to inform them where they stand in regard to their educational goals. Their incentive is to learn. To learn also comes from the desire to improve by reaching goal standards like an A or an A+. By not grading, we are reducing incentives and inhibiting their ability to reach for their future accomplishments. As we go through the pandemic together, please consider reviewing and revising the elementary fourth quarter grading for our students this 2019-2020 school year. These children are the future generation. Let's make them strong leaders and live by example. It is never too late to make a change, and I will do all I can to make a positive impact also. Sincerely, a concerned parent, Sharon Miller. And she also says that she would like to exercise the option of having her children's report card mailed to her. Thank you, Sharon, for your comments, and the superintendent has heard them, I'm sure. The next one comes from Lester Lewis. Greetings, members of the Garrett County Board of Education and County Commissioners. I have already shared my thoughts with Ms. Siebold privately. However, I want to email you as a group. The public has not heard from the board recently on the progress of the school's facility committee and what the next steps are on getting needed improvements and renovations done to our elementary schools. It has been almost 20 years since the last major renovation to an elementary school, I believe Route 40 in 2003. I personally would like to encourage the board to put an emphasis on the full, complete renovation of Broadford Elementary and the additional projects mentioned in the SFC to close in the open school concept of Friendsville and Grantsville. My concern is, given the current state of the local and state budgets because of COVID-19 shutdown, is there a realistic opportunity to actually see these projects come to fruition in the next couple of years, or are these long-term projects? I'd hate to see another 10 years or so go by before we see any significant improvements to the elementary schools in our county, when there has been so much focus the last 15 years on the secondary level schools. While those projects are definitely needed, I feel you need to take steps sooner rather than later to improve the learning environments for our youngest students in our community and make that your top priority going forward. Thank you for consideration, Lester Lewis. Thank you, Lester, for taking the time to write to us. The next one is Carol Glotfelty. My extreme displeasure and disappointment in the decision of the Garrett County Board of Education to assign a random C19 to all elementary students. Many students and parents took the assigned work seriously and completed it to the best of their ability. This required a great deal of time and effort, and to not have the work graded and feedback given is a disservice to those students. Carol, thank you for your comment. This comes from Terry Helbig. I have some questions as to your new proposal. This has to do with the proposed football, soccer, and track facilities. What is the total cost to relocate the football and soccer fields to the current track location? That would include all tile, drainage required with the necessary stormwater management, widening the track to 8 lanes, astroturf the field, new surface for the track, new lighting, moving the press box, moving bleachers, new concession stand with team locker rooms and bathroom facilities. How much did the state of Maryland allocate to this project, and how much is the local share to be paid by the county government, and how much has to be raised through private fundraising? What was the cost analysis compared to widening the football field and soccer fields approximately 6 more feet to comply with a minimum 55 yards width for soccer, allowable under high school rules, and astroturf that field? That cost analysis would include widening the current track to 8 lanes and resurfacing it and keeping it where it is. Given the current state of economic conditions and all the unknowns, I'm very interested in looking at the total projections for both projects. I trust the board has done that and would appreciate your answers in writing. I would add, if the concern the soccer field is too narrow, I can tell you the high school baseball field is only 300 feet down the left field line and has always been too short. The same for left center and center fields. When the board was having the field built in the 1980s, left field was only about 270 feet and had to be lengthened when brought to their attention. The extra 30 feet was still not adequate. Sincerely, Terry Helbing. Terry, thank you for your comment. This is from Michael Henderson. To the Board of Education, with all due respect, please do not construe my comments to reflect on any one person individually. It is my contention that from bad information, bad decisions are made. As we correctly pointed out in the May 27, 2020, there's a serious error in the rated capacity of Garrett County schools. This is a critical item to be addressed, which necessitates that this matter is resolved before any This is a critical item to be addressed, which necessitates that this matter is resolved before any other major decisions can be made. One cannot plan the future course of the schools when who and what you are planning for is not known. As was correctly pointed out at the May 27th meeting, there is an error in capacity of 1,203 additional students. Also correctly pointed out this very issue following the June 11th, 2019 meeting when over 1,000 students were added to the school system capacity. At that time, it was assumed that there had been a change in the law to explain the discrepancy. Investigation of facts show that there had been no changes in the law. There had been no significant changes in school building or classrooms. There had been no changes in the law to justify such an increase in capacity of the schools was corrected to the historical levels. For some reason, the same error is being repeated again with another 1,203 student capacity being reported. Once again, the error has erroneously been attributed to a change in the law. School capacity is covered by Title 14 independent agencies, COMAR 14.39.04.02. Seems that there is some confusion as to what spaces are considered. For the elementary grades, it is simple and straightforward. Elementary school capacity is determined by the number of classrooms alone. Other areas of school are not included in capacity ratings. Count the number of classrooms with each grade allowed, a given number of students. Pre-K 20, K 20, grades 1 through 5, 23, and grade 6 is allowed to have 25 students per classroom. Open space classrooms for the elementary grades are calculated by a formula of 32 square feet plus 2 feet of storage multiplied by the number of students, given a proper student-teacher ratio. Pre-K and K are allotted 50 plus 2 square feet per student in open space classrooms. Middle and high schools use a more inclusive formula that allows a percentage of gym space and labs to be used in the calculations of rating capacity. This is the same formula that has been used since 2009, and there has been no changes in the law. On November 4th, 2019, from Title 23, Public Works, COMAR 23.03.01 through 23.03.06 to COMAR 14.39.02.01 through 14.39.02.06. This was a reassignment only involving no changes in the wording of the law. Prior to recodification, Parts 04C and 04F were amended effective November 2nd, 2009. Regulation .04C amended effective November 2nd, 2009, 36.22 MD.R.1725. Regulation .04F adopted effective November 2nd, 2009, 36.22 MD.R.1725. COMAR regulations concerning state-rated capacity should in no way be confused with IEC regulation concerning new school construction, which may be a possible source of confusion concerning capacity. Currently, no justification for the errant increase in school capacity can be located. School capacity is a critical item that must be addressed before any changes in administration or contracts can be awarded. How does one create a plan for the future when who and what is being planned remains uncertain? The issue becomes magnified when considering the capacity that the County Board of Education creates and is reported to the IEC and shows as the SRC for policymakers. Policymakers consult these errant numbers to establish policy and make decisions. This becomes a critical issue, such as when the Garrett County Commissioners were discussing that schools have an average excessive overcapacity while the elementary schools in the South County are overloaded. In uncertain times, with the maintenance department reporting year-to-year decline in all the school buildings and the current proposed budget cutting funding for maintenance, Garrett County was to suffer tax revenue losses from the closing of the Loop Mill. The Kerwin bill has been vetoed, eliminating hopes of revenues from that source. The COVID-19 pandemic has devastated the economy, again crippling tax revenue and forcing working people into charity programs and unemployment. With all that being said, and the Garrett County school system budget being dependent on student population and good graces of the county commissioners. County commissioners, prior to the current pandemic circumstances, were discussing schools were on average only 63% occupied. South County Elementary is overloaded and North County is underutilized. The preposterous idea of busing elementary students for 3 hours a day to the North County has been rejected over and over by the citizens of Garrett County. Factual errors and miscalculations need to be addressed as rapidly as discovered to prevent serious errors in school policy, particularly when it pertains to the capacity of the schools to address the needs of our students. Believing that such a serious error has been applied to the current EFMP, the EFMP must be corrected before proceeding with business that will be affected by those miscalculations. Thank you for your attention. Again, Mike Henderson, thank you for your comments. The next one comes from Buzz Johnson. Dear Superintendent, President Tom Woods, and board members. I'm sorry to say that the public has been misinformed concerning the inadequacy of the width dimension of the football field property to accommodate a soccer football track complex. The width dimensions is more than adequate. I personally took measurements which justify my statement. The measurements are: 1, the width of the chain link fence on the south end of the football field is 320 feet or 106 yards. The approximate distance from the east sideline of the football field to the east side chain fence is 50 feet. The approximate distance from the west sideline of the football field to the west side of the chain link fence is 90 feet. These measurements more than allow for the planned facility to be located where the present football field is now. Yes, I understand that some adjustments will be required, such as moving the bleachers back closer to the fence on both sides, adding fill dirt on the west side. This still would be much more economically feasible than moving the present facility completely to a new location where the present track is located. After viewing and listening to the last meeting, it was apparent that some of the submitted letters that some people were concerned that the project would not continue, indicating that the propaganda machine had been well greased. Where did it originate? Several people who took time to write suggested that the track upgrade is long overdue. I agree wholeheartedly. In my previous letter, I favored the football soccer complex remain at the present location, adding AstroTurf. Even though there are some serious considerations for the Board of Ed to think hard about such ongoing studies of AstroTurf injuries and possible cancer-causing agents in AstroTurf. Also, there is an extensive and costly maintenance requirement for AstroTurf. I understand that $300,000 has been appropriated exclusively for the upgrading of both high school tracks. This is encouraging and presents tremendous potential for the future progress of the track teams. At SHS, my wife and I frequently utilize the track for walking. We have met several people there from the neighborhood and athletics. This complex enhances the community and helps to promote public relations for the high school athletic teams and the events being sponsored by the school. I suggested in my last letter that the track be upgraded and remain its present location. This will lessen any conflict of scheduling events of different sports to allow for 2 sports events to be scheduled at the same time. I think this idea would be very exciting for the participants of the track team to have their own facility. If there was ever a win-win situation, this is one. This will provide for future developments. From what I understand, there has been a gift from the governor of $1.5 million plus $300,000 to be divided by SHS and NHS in Garrett County. I firmly believe that there should have been public meetings held to allow the public input for citizens on this issue. I firmly suggest and urge that you put the project on hold and reevaluate. Do not make the same costly mistakes that other administrations have made in the past. I know we can all name a few, but I will not elaborate on that now. You have heard that haste makes waste. Do not let this be the case. You people are smarter than this. Sincerely, Vaughn W. Johnson. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for your comment. And Mr. Johnson also sent a comment a little bit later. It was after the deadline, but I'll go ahead and read the comment since we have it. Dear Superintendent Baker and board members, please accept this short letter as an addendum to my submitted letter at 4:25 today. I would like to additionally state that the measurements that I took far exceeded the NFHS suggested dimension rules. Thank you for consideration. Mr. Johnson, thank you. And that does end the comments that we received. And I thank each of you for taking the time to comment to the board your concerns. Okay, if I have any voice left, we will now move to the next one. Learning Management System, Continuity of Learning, which will be presented, I think, by Mr. DeVore.
Mrs. DeVore.
Hi, Garrett.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, yes.
And Mrs. Rinker has the slide. She can move the slides for you, so when you're ready to move to the next slide, she will move that for you.
Okay, you can go ahead, Mr. Rinker. So my objective with this slideshow today is to kind of bring you all up to date and profile the continuity of learning plan, the learning management system, and the next steps in the Garrett County Public Schools recovery program. So the first slide is, how did we get here? On March 13th, schools were closed. And like every other school system, we were put in the position of building a plane in flight. And I know that's a cliche that is used a lot, but that literally is what this has felt like. So during the superintendent meetings and the assistant superintendent meetings, we were being given this new term, continuity of learning. And when we were specifically told not to use instruction. So right off the bat, we prepared a Google Doc that was shared that included the distribution of packets, the distribution of devices and schedules. And at the same time, Mrs. Wislowski was beginning to throw resources that were coming our way into a live binder. She's very adept at building those live binders. And we were at one point well into the process. I don't have the date in front of me. Superintendents were told, and then later at an assistant superintendent meeting, we were told there are essential components that have to be included in the continuity of learning plan. Understand that originally, when we started the continuity of learning plan, we were told that there would not be a requirement of a written plan. So we had already started to build it, and then after it was being built, some parameters were given to us. So once we were given the 7 essential components of a continuity of learning plan, the lead team worked together to merge the information that was in the original Google Doc and the live binder. And you see at the bottom of this slide kind of what the live binder looks like, what the tabs are that are available to that. At the same time, press releases went out from the superintendent. You know, we were working in tandem with the superintendent throughout this process, and a press release went out kind of describing what the 7 essential components were and how to access them, what was in each one. Go ahead, Mrs. Rinker. So the
Yes,
goals
we have a question first, Mrs. Worth.
go ahead.
Know what the live binder is? Can you explain it a little bit in case somebody's wondering?
Sure. So do you mean what is a live binder, or
Yeah,
what is this live binder?
This live binder would be what I'm,
Okay.
understanding.
All right. So and we made that link public at the time that we merged the original Google Doc with the resources that were in the live binder. We made that public and publicized the link to it. So it's really pretty self-explanatory. The tabs, the dark blue tabs at the top of the home page, the table and contents. Then one page is the continuity of learning plan. Then in addition, you've got a tab that we're dumping coronavirus updates. There's a tab where we started the coronavirus discussion, the school closure activities. I don't know why that new tab's in there. I'm not sure what that is. And the resources to support learning at home. Those were the beginning stages. So if you go back to the second tab, after the table of contents, the first tab is the continuity of learning. And then within that, those green tabs are the 7 essential components of the continuity of learning plan as outlined by MSDE. Again, we were well into the process, and we had all the components covered for the most part. Then that continuity of learning plan had to be submitted to MSDE for approval, and ours was approved. Does that help? But each one of those tabs tells you, like, if you click on the sample schedules, you're going to go in there and you're going to see some sample schedules. If you click on the resources, it's going to take you to that huge page where Mrs. Wislowski has been banking all of the resources. Does that help?
Yes, very good.
So just a little slide to give you an idea of what the actual goals of our continuity of learning plan was. And our focus was to create and implement the following. We wanted to provide manageable, appropriate, and accessible learning differentiated by age, level, and need, provide instruction to students in essential learning standards, provide families with clear and consistent communication, which is what we were trying to do through making the Live Binder accessible to everybody, provide structure and common expectations across the district while remaining flexible. And flexibility was the key word throughout this process. You know, teachers needed to be flexible as far as technical difficulties and deadlines. A lot of teachers were working and still are working in very unfamiliar, uncharted territory. And they needed to be flexible with students submitting assignments and how they were doing it and within the timeline. Students needed to be flexible in how they were structuring and managing their own time in terms of the technical difficulties and their teachers responding back to them. We were also, you know, in a position where we were requiring flexibility on the parts of the parents and the caregivers because we needed their patience and their grace with both the teachers and the students. And having heard from a lot of parents throughout this process, it did require a lot of flexibility on a lot of, actually on everybody's part. And there is a note there that we appreciate everybody working together and doing the best that they could in this very unique, again, uncharted territory. Any questions or comments on that slide?
Don't think so.
Okay. Mrs. Rinker?
Yes. I just turned it.
Yep, you're good.
You're good.
Go ahead, Mrs. DeVore. We're
Are
the
we
next
on the
slide.
one?
Yeah.
Okay,
continuity
sorry
learning.
about that.
How did it go?
Okay, so, you know, how did it go? Well, like every other school system, you know, again, we were building it in flight. So we had to immediately look at our communication. Look at, we put out a remote learning survey just to get an idea of what was available in the homes throughout our county. We had an idea from some previous data, but not specific to this type of learning situation. We looked at the remote learning survey that we did at the county. I did one statewide with my colleagues to see what other systems were using and how they were pushing out their learning plans. And there was no option for attendance by remote learning in Maryland prior to this situation. And what I mean by that was, you know, for years and years, we've all been, as a building principal, I was getting questions all the time. Why do we have to have a snow day? They don't have snow days in West Virginia. There never was an option for remote learning in Maryland prior to this situation. We absolutely expect that to be an option moving forward after having been in this thrust into this situation. So during the remote learning survey, we looked at, you know, do the students have devices and the staff for that matter? Do they have connectivity? And what does our digital learning platform look like? And in some cases, as you all well know, some students were dealing with learning packets. Some students were on devices. Some students were on devices with downloads. Some students were on devices working from the internet. Some teachers had already had Google Classroom set up. So those teachers and those students were able to move forward in that platform. But and then there were also some online platforms through our curricular resources. And just like all of Maryland was all over the place with their delivery of online learning. And to be honest, with where we started, where we were at the starting place, from this 30,000 view that I have had watching this, I really do believe that the Garrett County Public Schools teachers did an amazing job. And again, we didn't have a consistent platform. So that's kind of how it went, how we moved through it. So, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I thought you were finished. Can you give the board a sense of what you gleaned from the survey in terms of data that you can, we don't need specific numbers, but some sense of where we were in terms of how much we could offer virtually versus learning packets versus, just tell us a little bit about the survey.
Yeah, I'm going to say, and again, I don't have those numbers right in front of me. I'm going to say we were at about 50-50. I don't know if Mr. Gank's not with us this evening. I think he knows those numbers a little bit better than I do. But I would say that we were about 50-50, 60-40, as far as being able to access the internet without major issues through the homes. Does that help?
Well, yeah, it does. Yeah. And maybe Mr. Gank, we can ask Mr. Gank to provide that to us the 23rd. I'm most interested in knowing from that survey where we were able to do the most of the virtual learning. Was it mostly in secondary level, elementary level? As we move forward, obviously we've got to have some sense of what group of students are we going to do what, offer what to in terms of learning options. So did you recall how that played out in terms of?
Yeah, there was definitely more online learning going on through the secondary level than the elementary. No question about that. But we had very robust learning going on in some elementary situations as well. But the majority of the online learning was more prevalent at the secondary level. And again, I don't have that data in front of me.
We can get that.
That'd be, I think, very good data for us to see on the 23rd as we learn more about what we're up against as well. But thank you for bringing this up.
And we have a very limited, in number, we have a very limited IT department, and we basically went from, in my observation, we basically went from a school system that was being augmented and supported by its very competent but small in numbers IT department to a school system basically being supported by the IT department because of the need. And again, Garrett County was not unique whatsoever in that situation. At the same time, the superintendent meetings bumped up to about a week, and the assistant superintendent meetings bumped up to about every week. Supervisors were meeting more frequently with their content areas, and we kept hearing about learning management systems. What learning management system are you on? What learning management system are you on? And it became very obvious fairly early into this process that we were missing a critical piece, being the learning management system. And although we did have, as I said previously, a tremendous amount of, I shouldn't say it's tremendous, but we have had in the past a tremendous amount of staff development in Google Docs, and some systems were presenting Google Docs as their learning management system, although that's really a different animal. Mr. Troutwine, for years, just through his passion and his knowledge and his just good old-fashioned hard work, was teaching all of us. I mean, he made me a Google Docs believer. I mean, I do just about everything on Google Docs because Mr. Troutwine brought me on board early on. But it was always on a volunteer basis. It was never rolled out as this is our delivery mode. So for that reason, we had going into this, we had teachers who were delivering their instruction 100% or close to 100% through Google Classroom. And then we had other teachers who had never even engaged in a Google Doc. So like we were from one end of the spectrum to the other. And as I said, it was never rolled out as a county initiative. So we were at all different phases. So again, at the superintendent, assistant superintendent, and supervisor meetings, we're hearing about, you know, learning management systems, and we brought that information back to cabinet and lead, and those discussions led us to the superintendent making the decision that we would be adopting a learning management platform. So
Need the next,
I'm gonna go ahead.
do you need the next slide? Oh, that's the next one is the learning management.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I moved on.
All right, Ms. Rinker had a question, I'm sorry.
When you said about downloads, would that be a parent would come pick up a device and it already had the assignments download on it, so they wouldn't need the internet, they could just get on and?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we ready? So in phase one, the way we decided to do the learning management system, and I have to say that, you know, a tremendous amount of work went into this, but I feel like it was really an efficient process. What we did, we have this, I don't know if you all know about Jessie Zimmerman, but she is a hidden gem in our IT department, and she can make things, you know, we use PowerSchool as our student management system. So she can make PowerSchool do things that, she just can make PowerSchool do amazing things. So it was important because we're so invested in PowerSchool that we find a system that interface with PowerSchool easily. And through the survey that I did across the county, questioning all the other systems, what they were using, through informal conversations, we kind of narrowed it down to the top three being Schoology, Canvas, and Blackboard. Many of us have used Blackboard over the years. That really was the first learning management system, and it's still being used by some colleges. My assistant superintendent meetings are still done on Blackboard. So are a couple of other MSD groups that I'm in. So we were, for the most part, more familiar with Blackboard than the other two. So the first phase was Jessie reaching out to the company and kind of vetting it through them to make sure that there was interface with PowerSchool and those very important IT questions that, you know, were deal breakers from us moving forward. Then we formed an LMS work group, and the way we did that was I asked Penny Proudfoot to identify 18 teachers at the elementary level, and Paul Edwards to identify 18 at the secondary level. Then we also added, to make sure that GCEA was represented appropriately, we asked for a specific GCEA rep at each of those levels. Those directors reached out through the principals, and that's how they got either volunteers or volunteers. I'm not sure how they got on the list, but they were added to a Google Doc, and then they became the work group. And those folks worked really hard and participated in workshops and demonstrations and discussions. Then I think that maybe you may have seen that the document, typically when we do a work group like this, we develop a Google Doc and just have it ongoing and adding everything to it as the new information comes in, adding it to the same place so that all of the information from the process is in one document. I think that document ended up being, I don't know, 35 or 40 pages or something like that at the end, because we just kept it open to everybody in the work group throughout the process so that they could ask questions there. We were dropping links in there to watch additional demonstrations, that kind of thing. And in addition to the teacher work group, we had an A&S work group of supervisors and principals who participated in demonstrations as well. And that's, I kind of gave you some dates there of when the initial meetings happened. Some groups asked for specific demonstrations on one of the platforms, so they came back and did additional ones. Any questions on this slide?
No, yes, Mike has a question.
So Schoolology is totally new, is that correct? To the Garrett County school system, for the teachers?
Yes, it will be.
So is that in the budget and the one that is to be brought up tonight for an action item, the license or whatever you want to call for it? Would that be in there?
I believe maybe Mrs. Schweitzer needs to answer where the budget is. I forget in the end if that came out of the CARES Act or.
We can ask that when we get to the budget. When we get to the budget, we need to ask if that's included as a certain line item.
It is.
Is the Kansas totally new this year too?
I think those are the three you were looking at.
Those were the three. That's a good question. So I want to make sure we're clear on that. We looked at Schoology, we looked at Canvas, and we looked at Blackboard. And if you go to the next slide, I think it'll become a little bit more clear to you.
Okay.
So we participated in all of those demonstrations and all of those discussions over a series of several weeks, and then we voted. We sent out a survey, and here's who. But I told you who was in each one of the work groups: the teacher work group and the A&S work group. And when I sent the survey out, I sent it with a specific drop dead. This is the end date that you had to vote by. It was very clear. And here's who voted. 36 teachers voted. 19 were secondary and 17 were elementary. 6 A&S people voted. 4 of those were elementary principals. 2 were high school principals. And then three people checked other. But when I looked at who they were, one should have checked teacher and one should have checked A&S, and then one should have checked other. So just to give you an idea of who voted and how they voted, we had 19 votes for in secondary. Well, I did that. Okay. So we had 22 votes for Schoology, 13 votes for Canvas, and 1 vote for other. And that vote was just, I'm not prepared to vote for either one at this time.
As I looked at the Schoology link, is it an interactive link that will be used by students as well to interact?
It absolutely is. It is where a student will go into his Schoology account, and every course that he's in will be in there. Every work group that he's in will be in there. The parents will go in there. We will eventually get to the point where this is how we're communicating with our groups within Garrett County Public Schools.
Okay, so have you as a management team formally adopted that you want to use Schoology? That is what we're going to go forward with?
Yes, we absolutely, and I'm gonna go there next on the next steps. But
the only thing that I would mention, and this is not it's not to be taken wrong. I'm not second guessing anything. I think you've done a lot of work, an incredible job of what we're doing. But it might have been nice to have incorporated a couple of students on your work groups. To let them see Schoology, see what they think about Schoology, what they think about, if they're going to be using it. I've got a young lady here, I'm sure, who would raise her hand to be on it if she were asked. And I'm not second guessing anything. I know it's hard to, it's hard. I understand it.
That's good advice. That's good advice, Mr. Woods. And honestly, if I'd have had a second to think about that, I think I probably would have really embraced that.
It's easy to think about things when you're sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah,
I do have an answer. This coming fiscal year and the following fiscal year, we will be using the CARES and the ESSER funds to fund Schoology for 2 years. That will give us 2 full years to work it into the operating budget. So we will be using that funding.
I thought that was the case, but finance questions scare me, so I just thought I'd let somebody.
That is the answer.
So we're good on to go.
And then I guess the third year, if it's still working good, then it can be brought to
Put it in our operating budget.
Oh, I hope it's working well. So then, and when we move on to next steps, how are we going to transition into Schoology? We immediately took that group of those 2 work groups together. We met together once the voting was done. We brought them into a virtual meeting, and we got volunteers or voluntold to take over the chairs of. We decided to split the PD up into elementary, middle, and high school groups just to make it a little bit more specific for the grade areas. Dr. Miller is going to chair and is doing already a phenomenal job, going to chair the work group for the elementary group, and she's got Candy Moss as her co-chair. Mr. Yoder is going to chair for the middle school, and Chuck Troutwine, who I already mentioned, who is, the expert, in our system as far as dealing with these types of programs. And he's going to be critical to us in the transition, because although he has done a phenomenal job of teaching a majority of our teachers Google Docs, we're going to need more staff development on Google Docs, because we will be using Google Docs in Schoology. Schoology is like a holding system. It's not a curriculum. It's not a it's a place where everybody can go to access everything else, access their lessons, access their curriculum, access their resources. And the thing that I neglected to mention earlier is that Schoology is owned by PowerSchool, so it is a very seamless fit. When a teacher assigns an assignment in Schoology, and then the students submit those assignments, it's graded and automatically goes into the Power Teacher gradebook. Like, there's not another step for the teacher. Whereas right now, regardless of how the teacher pushes out an assignment, the teacher has to grade it and then put it in the Power Teacher gradebook. But in Schoology, when assignments are pushed out through Schoology, the grading automatically goes in. So that was a little sidetrack there. Our high school chair is John Kaufman at Southern High, and his counterpart on the northern end is Greg Hostetler. Also, very critical people in this process are going to be our content specialists, Brian Shilp and Stephanie Waslowski, in helping, because again, all of our curricular content eventually will land in Schoology. So you'll be able to go in as a teacher and go right to your curriculum in ELA or your curriculum in science. And just because Mr. Shilp is new in his job and he's the supervisor of technology, and he volunteered to transcend both the elementary and the secondary training, just to make sure that there's consistency and nothing's kind of falling through. I kind of named him as the overall chair of this, but he has told me over and over again he's willing to do that. But Mr. Troutwine is, they're pretty much going to do it in tandem to make sure that what we have comes forward with us, and what we do moving forward is consistent across all the grade levels. So the first phase of our transitioning has already occurred. Jessie Zimmerman, again, is the star of the show, and she continued to work directly with the Schoology program. In getting it aligned with PowerSchool, she has already set up accounts for every teacher in the system. She's working on administrators. I just got my account. I don't know what today is, Tuesday. I think I just got my account yesterday, and I got in there, and just the little bit that I can see in my account, it's just so exciting to think of how we're going to be able to organize things and communicate with. I'm going to be able to communicate with my lead team right through there. So, and push out PD through it. And it just, I really, it's just endless as far as what we're going to be able to do with it. But we're going to have to do it, like I said, in phases and at a comfort level for everybody. So this is just such an important step for us. And it really is, Mrs. Baker and I have been talking about, you know, we just felt like we have been so successful when we labeled the big three and we focused on the big three, and those big three are embedded in our system. And in moving forward, we've kind of, again, been thrust into this, but we need to make sure that our online, our blended learning and our online learning platforms are, you know, a huge focus, because part of what was wrong with, not wrong per se, but we didn't push it out as a system. We didn't push Google Classrooms out as a system, so we don't have everybody on the same page. It's going to be just very, very important that we consistently push this out as a system initiative. And it's not like, oh, I don't do Schoology. That's not an option. That is going to be our platform moving forward. So everybody has to have that sense of consistency. So that's the first step, was Jesse getting that set up. But then number two was the PD committee working and setting up those subcommittees. And now we have out there, we pushed it out through principals. There's a self-paced course that everybody can go through, and everybody is being asked to go through. Every teacher, every administrator is being asked to go through the self-paced course just to get familiar with the platform. And then now we're already in the process of doing the train the trainers. Last Friday, the secondary group, so you saw who your leaders were in that group, then they recruited train the trainers from every school and sat through a 3-hour training. This Friday, we've got an elementary group, somebody, at least one representative from every elementary school going through the train the trainer. And then through June and July, we're going to continue the self-paced course and some training. And phase 5 is going to be ongoing training throughout the school year. I know that was a lot, and it's a brand new concept, but I just wanted you to kind of have an idea of how much work has gone into this, and what a heavy lift it's going to be for us, but what a beneficial tool it's going to be for us should we face something in the future going forward like we did this year. So any questions on that?
Yes.
I just have one quick. I noticed under your PD subcommittee chairs, you have elementary Dr. Nicole Miller, which July 1st, she will be the Director of Elementary Education. Shouldn't we have on there Mr. Edwards as being the Director of Secondary Education under middle or high?
Dr. Miller volunteered for that role. It was something that she was comfortable with and wanted to work with going forward. Mr. Kaufman volunteered. He was very competent. Both he and Mr. Hostetler have done a phenomenal job. I know they've been communicating with Mr. Edwards, and it wasn't so much about the position as it was about, you know, when you're in a position of pushing something like this, you've got to really have the passion and for the content, and both of those men volunteered to do it. And you know, my theory has always been, you know, I want you to want it, and they're doing a tremendous job. So it wasn't about the position as much as it was about, you know, being at the right place at the right time and wanting to push it out.
Okay, I think we're moving to the next slide.
Okay.
What's next?
So the next slide, I think that it's the GCPS recovery plan. I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of where we are, and we wanted to learn from where we've been. And I put that link in there. I just put it in there to refer to the document. The document is an internal planning tool that, again, it's just a Google Doc, but where we start putting the information in and then just add as we grow. But I think I referenced last week, Mrs. Rinker, if you'll go to the next slide. So where we're going with the GCPS recovery plan is we're using the Tiger Teams approach, and that's a targeted, immediate group execution and response approach. So if you look at this schematic, you've got at the top our GCPS recovery plan, and under that you've got the continuity of learning plan and the facilities and operations. So then we broke those up. Under facilities and operations, we also added the safety, health, and safety and health services, and then under so I'm the lead on the continuity of learning, and Mr. Waslowski is the lead on facilities and operations. On the safety and health services Tiger team, you've got Mr. Swift and Becky Aiken co-chairing that. Under accountability, grading, and reporting, you've got Jim Morris chairing that Tiger team. Under technology, connectivity, and digital learning, you have Jeff Gank chairing that. And under staffing, professional development, and TPE, you've got Dr. Wilson chairing that. And then I'm just showing you, under technology and connectivity, you've got devices, connectivity, and the LMS. But under each one of these others, you've got a multitude of other spin-offs. But I couldn't keep adding them because then the schematic gets so long and the words get so tiny that you couldn't read them. But I just wanted to show you how we have these Tiger teams broken up. And in each one of those teams, we have administrators, teachers, paraprofessionals, parents, just a multitude of, and those people in all of those Tiger teams will become our constituent group, our stakeholders. And then what we're doing with those, each one of those teams is meeting, and then coming back to the superintendent level with recommendations to her periodically throughout the process. And this is how we kind of vetted what we wanted to do with this survey. And the first step was each one of those teams got together and met and discussed the survey. Each one of those teams got together and met and talked about the different learning models going forward. And then we came back to what we're calling recovery team progress meetings with the superintendent. And then that's where she's kind of making the final decisions and vetting the information. So if you go to the next slide, that's just really just a timeline of where we've been up to this point. And the next slide, this is where we are today. I'm actually presenting this to you this evening because that came out of the Tiger team's recommendations. And then the survey question worksheet, that was another link in there. I have those links in there for my purposes, and I didn't know they were going to be live because I could see where it would be very confusing if you delved into it and without having participated in the hours and hours of work that have gone into it. But so our hope is that the surveys will go out tomorrow from the superintendent. They will be sent electronically through our Facebook page, and I'm not sure how the superintendent is going to exactly, you can speak to that if you want to, Mrs. Baker. But the survey will be live for a week, and then we will use the results of the survey to determine which direction we want to go moving forward to build the models. Initially, we thought the survey might include different models, but in talking through these Tiger teams, we got a tremendous amount of feedback, and it was just obvious that we aren't ready to push out models. We need to know this very basic information first so that we can start narrowing it down to what models we do want to look at. And then it's just showing you the rest of the timeline of what we're proposing and how we're hoping to move forward.
Okay. Go ahead, Monica.
The GCPS recovery plan, is it something we're doing because of the COVID-19? Are we doing it just here in Garrett County, or is it our MSDE required?
That's a very, very good question, and a little bit of a chuckle, a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek chuckle here, because that term started coming up, recovery plan, and for a few weeks, 3-4 weeks, we're hearing recovery plan, but you won't need to produce a recovery plan. Well, that's exactly what they told us about the COLP initially too. But now we're just at the point where there's, just today in my assistant superintendent's meeting, we were told there will be a recovery plan. I think they're going to tell the superintendent tomorrow what the timeline is going to look like, but we will have to produce a recovery plan for the state.
Okay, you do have June 23rd question mark. Are yes or no, you're going to share those survey results with the board?
Well, the reason that question mark was in there was I wasn't 100% sure at that time that was going to be, that's going to be our extra board meeting, and if I could fit it in, if I would be allowed to fit it in. I thought.
No, you're more than allowed. Right, we definitely want to see it, yeah.
Okay, good.
That'll keep us abreast
We'll
of
take the
what
question mark out.
the county is thinking.
Yeah, and then our hope would be that we would share that with you then, and then the very next day, if you'll see that I already have the Google Meet set up for each of the progress meetings for the superintendent, and the very next day after we share it with you, we'll be able to share it with the whole progress team, and the superintendent will be able to share your feedback as well. Then that should be able to help us build, and to be honest, that's where the real work starts, is after June 24th, after we've looked at that data and really kind of drilled down on that data. That's when we start building the model recommendations and everything that goes along with that.
Yeah, Mike has another question.
The question is about the survey. So there's a couple questions for it. It's important. About how many questions is there, how long will it take for people to fill out that are listening? And Ms. Baker can explain how they can answer it. And just a sample of like one question that would be on there.
I can give you the whole survey in 30 seconds. Student's name, there's a drop-down box for which school does he attend. There's a drop-down box for what grade is he in. Question number 1 is going to have to do with if schools are permitted to open in stage 2, do you plan to send your child back? Yes or no? Number 2 is nationally, we're looking at different models. Which one of these 3 models do you favor? That doesn't mean you're signing on. It just says, at this point, which of these 3 models do you favor? Question 3 says, does your child have access to private transportation, or does he only have it in the morning? Does he only have it in the afternoon, or does he not have access? And then the last one is, if there's a summer recovery program, are you going to consider are you interested in sending your child to that?
And the 3 models are?
What was that?
3 models. You said which of these 3 models? What are the 3 models?
Every other day, so an AB day, an AB week, or full-time learning, distance learning. We just want to get a feel for what parents, when parents are talking to me, I have some people that say, I just want to stay on distance learning. If we're not coming back every day, I just want to stay on distance learning. And I have other people saying an AB day would be better. Other people saying an A week, B week would be better. And again, it says in the introduction, and I think I'm pretty sure Mrs. Baker included it in her press release that she sent out to let the public know this survey was coming. Everybody's preference is to go back in stage 3. Everybody goes back and we go back as normal. That's what everybody's preference is. I don't care who I've talked to, parents, kids, teachers, everybody wants to go back. with a normal
As long as we
schedule.
can do it, yes, as long as we can do it safely and within the guidelines of where we are, absolutely.
But this work for the, I'm sorry, this work for the recovery program the recovery plan has to continue, because if we get in a situation next year where there's an outbreak, we have to have that plan in place.
Mrs. Cattouli has a question.
I just want to say that I think survey is a great idea to get feedback from the community, and I am really interested to see, I know I won't be here, but I'm interested to see how everything goes.
And I did put in the press release, to your point, Mr. Woods, on the Schoology, which was a very good point. We've asked families to talk with their kids, talk with each other on what they're thinking, get the student input. And then, subsequent surveys will be probably directed towards, specific groups. But we really do want to, we want to hear what, at some point, what the students' concerns are, what the families' concerns are, how we can best go back safely. So thank you very much, Kate.
And we opened up the survey so that they have to access with the student, well, they don't have to access it, but they have to list the student's name. So, if we have 15 responses under the name of Katie Cattouli, 12th grade Southern High School, then we'll know there's, something a little fishy going on. We want to make
She's
sure.
capable of doing that, so you need to keep an eye on that.
But we did open it up for one survey per student, because, and that came out, one of the parent actually in my Tiger 2 team, who has 2 kids at an elementary school and 2 kids at a middle school, and she said she might answer differently for each of the 4 kids. So we do want to have as rich a data as we can get.
That was one of my questions.
I was making a joke about the Katie Cattouli, but we could have Katie Cattouli, we could have her in there twice, because a parent can respond for, Katie can respond with her mom and Katie can respond with her dad.
Okay. Mrs. Rinker had another question, I think.
So
Yes.
there'll be separate surveys for each student. That was my
Yes.
question. And then the other question is, the surveys went out, but Ms. Baker, we really still don't know what the fall will look like, correct? We don't have no direction of if school will be normal, if it will be different days, right, correct?
Right. No,
People that are listening, just because surveys going out, we truthfully do not know.
we do not know. We have not made any decisions. We really do want stakeholder feedback, parents, students. And like I said, we will also be working with teachers. We don't know what stage we'll be in. We don't know if we'll start school, and as Mrs. DeVore said, may go back a phase, which we all hope does not happen, but we don't know, and that's why we want people to fill out the survey so we can start planning for the different stages. Thank you. Right, nothing has been decided.
Do you have a date that you will hopefully have the decision made for?
Well, I see that Mrs. DeVore said I will get a lot more information tomorrow at our weekly superintendent meeting. And I'm hoping they give timeline guidelines so that we know some dates that we have to make a decision, a certain decision no later than this. That's a very good question. I'm hoping we get some more direction on that tomorrow.
The other thing that we're hoping to get out of the superintendent's meeting tomorrow, and then subsequently the assistant sup meetings next week, is what components are going to be required in the recovery plan. Because we didn't find that out until we were well into the process on the COLP. So if we can know, it's like giving the rubric to a test after the test was given. So hopefully, they were building their program in flight too. It's not a cut on MSDE, but I think that they are trying to be more prepared in this process and giving us the information up front.
Right, as are we.
Was there, the survey is for students, obviously, you got to put a student name in. Was there any thought given to surveying our employees?
Yes, absolutely. That survey's already done, and basically it's asking so what we decided through the Tiger teams was we decided to do this very simple survey first. We wanted to get this out and get the parent and student information first, because we have we still have a little bit of, we have at least that extra day with the teachers to communicate with them, but we actually already have that survey done going out to staff. It's basically asking the same questions. And originally we were going to do a third one for students, but we decided to have the parents and students do this one together. But we are going to, this is Waslowski's suggestion, which I think is a good suggestion, just to get a sampling of students, was to push one out through the student government representatives. That way we would have a good sampling of both middle schools and both high schools.
Well, listen, thank you very much. We don't want time. I got one more question from
Well, the
Mrs. Rickard.
discussions, because this is new to us, we weren't part of the survey or questions on the survey, but I thought of something that might have been a good question to be on there. We had 2 public comments tonight about their concerns, and I actually agree with them. For elementary, they're not getting an actual grade, and there is ones that are really striving, and that is important.
But they are getting grades.
Right, but not on the report card, correct? They're not getting like. Correct.
They are getting grades. They just, teachers were given the parameters that a student couldn't fail because of COVID-19. So a student can't get less than a student can't fail the fourth quarter. So a student can't get less than a 60% for the fourth quarter. And we just wanted to make sure that nobody, because, we went into this without it's not going to be like this next year. And I don't think I even touched on that in my presentation, but we are building in parameters for attendance if we're offline, online. We are going, and that's a requirement at the state level, to build in parameters for attendance, to build in parameters for specific parameters for grading starting next year, whether we're in a blended system or face-to-face or online. So, but as far as this year and the fourth quarter, it wasn't fair to anybody to fail them because of quarter 4. So they're absolutely getting grades. Their grades can help them. The work they did in the fourth quarter can absolutely help them. It cannot hurt them.
I'm confused. Is there?
Yeah, what is she saying?
They do get grades.
Explain to us, Karen, for those of us that, aren't familiar with how it was done. Personally, I'm not familiar with how it was done, but I think Monica's question is very valid. We had 2 people that are concerned about it. So explain to us the coding that went on and the decisions that was made.
That was something that was discussed, but it wasn't that CV19 or whatever that code was. That was discussed, but it wasn't, that's not what was agreed upon. Our teachers are entering grades.
One of the issues is this, that, as she said several times throughout the presentation, we are trying to learn from, what occurred from March 13th to June 11th. Some students were doing a lot of work, some students were doing a little bit of work. We left the grading of individual assignments up to teachers, just as we do in the regular classroom. Unfortunately, for some of the packets, we were told for several weeks that we were not allowed to collect them. So, we had to make assurances for that as well, that nobody would be penalized, that the work would only help them. Now, if you have a student that you're right on the report card, but if you go into PowerSchool, and I looked today to verify this, if you go into PowerSchool and you have a child that's in 3rd grade at Yocklades, and they have done all of their work in their packet, or they've done all of their work on their device, everything is in there in PowerSchool, scored with feedback, just as it would have been if we were in school. But so as not to punish anyone, so on their report card, they will not receive the zeros, just receive the COVID-19. But everything that's been submitted should be in PowerSchool for parents to review.
Well, then if that's the case, I can still see where the parents were coming from. I'd be upset if I had
Well,
elementary.
I understand as well. I
Do
understand as well.
Send, and which I remember I'd asked, was it 2 weeks ago or last month, about the report cards. Because I said, are we going to mail them? And someone had said, well, you can access them online. But I'm the old fashioned. I would like mine to be mailed in the mail too for my
Right, we're
daughter.
giving, right.
I think we need to make sure that the parents get that option for the final report card, if it's mailed or online.
They
Because
do.
everybody can print and have online. But could you not submit what you're saying to us? Because maybe some parents can't get on Power School and see their actual grades. Could we print that off and send it with the report card as an exception for the fourth quarter for this year? Because then that
Sure.
might,
I
give
will
some
I will look
settling
into that if that's a
some of the
possibility.
parents.
I'm sure it's possible. And Dr. Miller, we talked today, and she is aware of the parent concerns as well. So we can certainly look to provide more information to parents on the individual assignments.
And as a parent too, and I've seen it, it's on the lives of, we have it here on GCPS, you look at it. You know, and there's two ways you can look at this. There's always pros and cons to everything. When you look at middle school and on the high school, because I've heard some kids make comments, this is not a good thing. It says on here, for the fourth marking period, quarter four, teachers were given the direction that no student would learn less than a D, 60% for the quarter. This ensures that no student will fail due to the COVID-19 school closures, which I understand the COVID-19, and I understand everybody's situation is different. You know, where you are, your parents are working, you might not have internet, I understand that. However, by putting that out there, I have heard numerous students say, we don't have to do our work because we know we're going to get the D and we're going to pass. So on that perspective, that's not a good thing to have here where some of the students see it. Like, that is very unsettling.
Well, two things. If that they weren't necessarily going to pass if they hadn't done any work the first 3 quarters. It wasn't like students could earn a 30 and a 30 and a 30 and then get a D and then pass that class. They had to be doing the work all along up until March 15th. The second part is the directive that no student would be penalized, fail because of COVID-19 was a directive from the state superintendent. And she said it in many press releases, almost that exact line, that students could not be penalized and fail because of COVID-19. They could still fail, but the reason for if they failed course or were retained would be not just based on COVID-19, not the fourth quarter.
And
So,
Mrs. Shrinker, that also goes back to slide number 3 where I talked about flexibility. We had to have flexibility. This was not something that we were prepared for, and nobody needed to be penalized because of what, no teacher, no parent, no student needed to be penalized for the situation.
But I do like the suggestion, and if there is a way that we can print that and send it with the report card so parents can review it, we will certainly.
Yes, thank you.
Otherwise, all of that is wasted. I mean.
Right. Well,
Yeah, because some of the parents really had to settle down with some of their elementary students and say, you need to do this, this is very important. I mean, like, it put a lot of, and I know it's how it is, and we move on, but.
But if we got the information, why not get it to the parents?
Yes,
Right.
yes,
absolutely.
and that was, thank you.
Okay, any further questions, anyone?
Thank you for your time. I know that was a lot of information, and I probably should have been pushing some of that out earlier, but I was just too busy doing the work, and I appreciate your time this evening.
Sure, thank you very much for the presentation. I think I speak for all 5 of us. We're very interested in being kept up to date, step by step. As to what, this is one of the most important things in our lifetime that's ever occurred in terms of education. So, you know, we don't want to do it, but we want to be a part of the process as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, we've got new business that we need some action on. The first thing is food and nutrition services bids for action. Are you presenting that?
No, it should be Mr. Germain. Are you on the line, Mr. Germain?
I am.
Okay, before we start, I'll ask the superintendent, do you have a recommendation to approve the 3 food vendors for the FNS department?
I do. My recommendation is to approve the bids that will be presented to you.
Okay, there is a recommendation by the superintendent to approve the 3 bids. Is there a motion on the floor to approve? So approved by Monica. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Charlotte. Discussion? Do you want to, anything that you'd like to say, Mr. Jermaine?
We have worked with these 3 vendors for several years now. So the grocery bid was the only thing that was actually due this year. Our ice cream, milk, bread, and chemical bids have been extended for another year. So these are just the grocery bid that needs to be approved.
Okay. Is there a discussion by board members? Okay, there is a motion on the floor and seconded to accept the food and nutrition services bid. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. And it's a 4-0 vote in favor. The next item is the school meal increase, which is also an action item. Madam Superintendent, do you have a recommendation?
Yes, I recommend that we approve this as well. The requirement, Mr. Jermaine, comes to us each year. So my recommendation is to approve the price increase, as difficult as that may be.
Okay, there's a recommendation by the superintendent to approve the price increase for school lunches. Is there a motion to accept that recommendation?
So moved.
So moved by Rodney. Second?
Right.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Matthew. Second by Matthew. For the rate increase discussion?
You got 10 cents, is that correct?
Yes, you want to speak to the rate increase, Mr. Jermaine?
Yeah. Every year we have to do a formula worksheet from USDA, and that tells us what our rate increase has to be. They will never require anything over 10 cents, but ours has always been at the 10 cent level. Well, not always, but typically is at the 10 cent level. So that's what we are required to increase it by.
Okay. I think we all read the memo you sent to us, so it's one of the things that we really don't have a lot of choice in the matter. Any further discussion?
I have a question
Okay.
on
Sure.
we can do this, and then I have a question for Mr. Jermaine.
Okay, sure. Those in favor of the motion on the floor to accept the school meal rate increase, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed, nay. And it's a 4-0 vote. We do have a question for you, Mr. Jermaine.
Okay.
Students that would have had money into their lunch account, and then this happened, they've been back in school, I guess the money will still be there the same as it was when they start in the fall, correct?
Yes, it always stays there unless they request a refund for their money. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Jermaine.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is the student handbook for 2021 school year, which is being revised. I think Dr. Lawver hopefully is there. Are you there, Dr. Lawver?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great.
Good.
This is an action item as well.
No.
No. This is,
We
this
don't
is
have
for
to-
information.
But it is the last, it is action in terms of us listening to it the last time. Want to just tell us what the
Yes. There's always different places in here that you just need to change the years to bump it up to the next year, or for instance, with a new student board member, changing that information. And then in the forms, also having to change that, where we did make some change on page 30, where we have used what's called the SWIS program to collect the data with PBIS, and Mrs. DeVore had mentioned all but miracles sometimes that Mrs. Zimmerman can do, and she has worked with Power School to be able to collect that data. So we won't be dependent on having to pay for the Swiss program. There was some wording change there to take out the references to the Swiss program.
Okay.
And then on page 47, it discusses discipline and has some Kumar language in it, and several of the principals felt that was confusing. So I added some clarifying information, some work on that, just to clarify number of days of suspensions and that information. I know last month there was some discussion about code of conduct, and the code of conduct is actually on page 34 where that begins. And I believe it was in 2012, there was some major changes in COMAR and state discipline code, and number of days of suspension that a student could have, and the reasons for expulsion. So, of course, at that time, we had to change our discipline policy and handbook to be to reflect the changes in COMAR and the state code of conduct. But we do have a code of conduct. The whole emphasis back in 2012, and I think I know we've been working on it, and other counties also, is to look at more teaching of behavior, and rather than just being punitive, working with the student to teach correct behavior. And for instance, like using restorative practices. Our PBIS program does a lot to prevent discipline issues and behavior. So we have been working on putting a lot of those types of strategies in to prevent and teach appropriate behavior. And as always, you know, there's a small percentage that may not respond to the interventions that we do. If they're not responding at tier 1, and we use response to intervention behaviorally just as we do academically, they go to tier 2, and that's where the pupil services team will discuss the student and look at different interventions. And at that point, at tier 2, if there hasn't been any change, then we'll look at tier 3, looking at a functional behavior assessment, behavior intervention plans. So, you know, and those few students that may have the most difficult behavior are the ones that you really struggle with, but you can't just suspend them. You certainly can't expel them. Those are students we have to provide a program. And under the new COMAR, even if you suspend or expel a student, you still have to provide them with the educational program and their services. We have done and will be doing a lot of work on the areas of interventions for students and areas to try and prevent the difficulty. And some of those, unfortunate behavior issues, as you well know, are very young students that we have that have had a lot of difficulties even before they came to school, and then we try to work with them to get them more stable and to the point where we can provide education. But I wanted to point out that, you know, we do have a code of conduct, and it's located basically right in the middle of that handbook.
Yeah, I know we all saw, yeah, that code of conduct. You have a
Is that
question?
what you was questioning about?
No,
behavior?
the code of conduct,
Something,
yeah, from years ago was a code of conduct that said, if you do this, this is gonna happen. If you do this, this is gonna.
actually seen it.
Yes, it was there in front of you, what the next step was if you did these things. This is more of as he says, a restorative action plan to try to change the mindset of the student rather than show the student what the next conclusion is going to be depending on your action.
One thing that
I understand the the whole. I get it that we changed directions from what was 25 or 30 years ago to where we are today. I do think it's a valuable tool for teachers to have, though. I will always believe that if you have something in your room that clearly indicates in your room, these are the actions that will not be tolerated. That sends a message to each student. It's visible. I see it. And if every teacher follows it, I think we send a message to all our students that this is what we expect to be acceptable behavior.
Yeah,
and,
actually, a part of the positive behavior interventions and supports, the PBIS program, requires every classroom to have class rules, and they relate to the school rules, but that is a requirement with PBIS. So I think the number of teachers that have rules in their classroom, hopefully is at 100%, but that is an expectation with PBIS.
Well, yeah, I think where we send the mixed message sometimes is the rules in my classroom certainly aren't the rules in your classroom. And the rules in one classroom are very stringent, the rules in another classroom are very lenient. So as a student, which where am I and what rules am I following? Those have been going on since the beginning of time. But those are the kinds of things I think in this day and age that students, I will always be a firm believer that students will do what you ask them to do if you do it in the correct way. And I don't think that has ever changed. Every student will do what you ask them to do if you do it the correct way. And so that's my soapbox.
Yeah, we all know relationships carry a lot of weight in working with our students.
I know that this is what they get when they get back to school and the parents sign, the students sign. But to be honest, I don't think that each child is going to actually read each page. So, I agree with what Mr. Woods was saying. I mean, you do have the classroom rules. Some of them are pretty simple for, you think, elementary. Keep your hands to yourself. Raise your hand. But what you were saying is they actually seen it. You knew that you didn't want this to happen because it was real. You seen it on the board or on the wall. So I think what Mr. Woods is saying, it would be good if we could bring that back somehow. That's a positive thing.
It's too black and white. And that's what MSDE has told us when they were revising the disciplinary, what Dr. Lauber is referring to in 2012. We had to allow for gray areas. We couldn't say if you did this. And I remember when we talked about it, I did as a principal as well, but it did not allow for gray areas for individual students. It was too black and white. So I don't know that we're allowed to go back to what we had before.
The state board and the legislature wanted principals to have more discretion in how they dealt with the student, looking at all the issues around one student versus another. So part of this was putting more discretion in, and you're correct, it does create more gray areas, and having to look and work through with that student what may best serve them in terms of teaching the appropriate behavior that we want to see. But all those changes did not come about very easily, and I understand why, but yet that's, as they say, that's the law. And we've had advice of counsel through MABE, who definitely recommended that we follow the state code.
Yeah, I understand your position. I understand the position the board is placed in. As a 40-year educator, I just don't agree with MSDA's approach. That's just the way I have to say it. I think there are students who know what the rules are going to be, and they know what the consequences will be. In my 40 years of being in education, are much more likely to understand the rules they're expected to adhere to, rather than being always in a great situation. So, you know, it is what it is, you know, but I empathize with teachers who say,
I do too.
if I had rules in my classroom that I know I could enforce, I could be a better teacher in terms of behavioral problems. And I empathize. I understand what they're saying. I do. So,
and we still can suspend students. It doesn't say we can't, but
I'm not suspending either. I don't think every answer is not suspending. It really isn't.
correct.
Most of the time, the answer is building a relationship.
Yep.
Most times, if you sit down with that student who's in trouble for 15 or 20 minutes and show them that you care about them and build a relationship, you can cure the problem in many cases. But the classroom teacher needs, I think, that tool that says, this is my expectation. Okay. What it's going to be. Okay. Yes,
Dr. Lawver, when he started, he said that we need to be able to teach the behavior to the students. I mean, like, responsibility is to do that.
Well, you know, we have in pre-K through 8th grade our called Second Step program. It's social emotional learning that teaches social skills and the expectations, which it really goes along well with the PBIS program. But if a student's having difficulty, we can look at reteaching certain skills or lessons from the Second Step program. We have other social emotional learning skills that a school counselor can focus on, you know, to work with those students. And again, what's difficult for everyone are those students that are we would call them high flyers, that just have very much have a lot of difficulty following structure and rules, and usually have a lot of difficulty with emotional control, which comes out in their behavior.
So I guess, do we have many that have currently took advantage of this Second Step program and using it?
Oh, it's school-wide. It was very fortunate when we, at one point it was, you know, voluntary. I believe we had 3 schools involved with it. And then when Dr. Teets was still superintendent, he stated that every school, he wanted it being used in every school. Now, they don't have a high school version, but they do have pre-K through 8th grade. And it's evidence-based. They've done a lot of research with it, and I'm, I guess, a big fan of Second Step because of what they've done. And they just updated the middle school curriculum to make it more current to the students. Again, you're not going to get 100%, but my feeling's always been you have to do a lot of different programs and strategies, because what works for one kid may not work for another. But if you're able to use a number of strategies, you can sometimes focus in on what might get the best results from that child and their parents, because we know parents need to work with us on behavior and discipline, just like academics.
Okay.
I guess, thank you, if it's you, or I'm not sure who typed it up, the thing that had the 8 updates and revisions, that makes it really helpful when you're looking.
Sure.
I don't see a big difference to discipline, which goes back to behavior. I guess my question is, Baker, is there anything, I know that the MSD, there's certain things you cannot do, I realize and I respect that, but we haven't really changed anything. And I know, yes, students haven't been in school the last couple months, but prior to that, that was a concern, was behavior. I mean, we know we had staff being hurt and different things. That is a concern. And it's more concerning when we go back this fall, whether it be all day or the modified schedule. I'm sure these kids are acting out, high flyers where you use, it's probably be more escalated because they've been away out of school for a longer time. So my concern is, I guess, nothing going to change any learning or anything we do with discipline behaviors at all, because I know that was a big concern.
Well, and I absolutely agree. It is a concern, and I have shared with the board that I do worry about the students' return in the fall in whatever capacity, as you said. You know, I think Dr. Lauber completes the code of, or the handbook with a team of people, and there are a number of things, whether we've changed them or not, there are a number of things in addition to everything he's mentioned, with the behavior coach, the behavior coaches, counselors, you know, that a variety of approaches that we can certainly explore. You know, one thing we talked about last month was to continue to build our capacity within our school system with people who are trained to address behaviors, trained to help with building those relationships. So I do see a tie to the handbook, but there are a number of things that are embedded in the handbook that we do on a daily basis, and there are a number of strategies that we employ every day with our highest flyers. We have to keep working on those behavior plans and working to address those behaviors. Yeah, it's not an easy solution, as you well know.
No, I know it's not, but
as you well know,
it's one of the hot topics.
It is.
Brought to our attention, and
it is very
I need to
much
see change, I guess, or do something differently to make me, like, to just feel a little better about it.
I agree too.
Well, Phil, thank you, Dr. Lauber.
Sure.
Dr. Phil. We appreciate all the work you did in your committee, and I know it's a very difficult task, and we will start anew in August. Thanks so much.
I'll be back next month for the approval then.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
We now have occupational physical therapy services bid.
That's Dr. Mangus, and she's actually here, so.
Okay, Dr. Mangus is going to come in with us. Madam Superintendent, do you have a recommendation?
I do, as Dr. Mangus gets comfortable there. The occupational and physical therapy services, as you're aware, that this is a firm that we have been working with for almost 30 years, and I would recommend that we continue and accept the bid. Okay,
there's a recommendation by the superintendent to accept the occupational physical therapy services bid as provided. Is there a motion of such? Motion by Monica, is there a second?
Second.
Charlotte? Charlotte beat you, Matthew.
Okay.
So there is a motion and a second discussion. Would you like to bring us up to date on it first of all? Dr. Angus?
Yes, absolutely. So every year we request proposals for OTPT service contracts through them within our county. And so that is noted for proposals that was published in our local Republican on May 21st. And we have a set from that, which is very good. We used our rubric that was outlined in the request for proposals, looking at responsiveness, qualifications and expertise, quality of services, and cost. And given that information, we have School Therapy as the recommended contracted organization. Okay. And if so, that would be our 28 years with them.
Excuse me. All choked up here. Any questions for Dr. Mangus or discussion? Okay, hearing none, we have a motion on the floor in a second to accept the therapy services bid. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And motion carries. Next order of business, special education staffing plan for action.
Do you
have a recommendation?
I also recommend that we approve the staffing plan as presented by Dr. Mangus for the projections of fiscal year 21.
Okay. The superintendent's made a recommendation that we accept the special education staffing plan. Is there a motion of such?
I make a motion.
I think that's Matthew, perhaps. We can hardly tell sometimes. Motion by Dr. Paul, for a second. Seconded by Charlotte. Therefore, the motion's on the floor. Discussion. Hearing no discussion.
Oh, I had one.
Okay, we do. I'm sorry.
Okay. When I looked at, I pulled up, you might not have it, but just a simple question. Look at 2018 to 2019. I noticed we're getting a decrease, like academic, it looks like, different things. So elementary, the one you just gave us, the academic, it says Pedro Elementary, proposed amount is 78 for projection. And in 2018-2019 elementary, receiving academic services, 102. Seems like it's not a bad thing, but I guess student fees are constantly changing, correct?
Absolutely.
Say it.
Yeah, absolutely. And enrollment, of course, affects that. So we usually have more students identified. So as those waves go through, we have staffing and so forth. But yeah, enrollment and numbers. I also credit a lot of that to the RTI process we put in place. We've really sounded that up a lot, and so we're identifying those students earlier and getting them the intervention they need to narrow that gap so that they don't require services.
Any other questions? Dr. Mangus? Okay. A motion on the floor to accept the special education staffing plan. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And it is a 4-0 vote.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mangus.
Thank you, Mr. Wood.
The organizational chart for action. Madam Superintendent, do you have a recommendation?
I do, and this is my presentation. You have the organizational chart. At last month's meeting, we did, approve the STEM supervisor, Mr. Schultz. That was a change in title. It was science and mathematics, and we changed it to STEM supervisor. But in the process, we made a couple of other changes as well. There were no additional staff hires, no changes in anything except for to align it with the actual practice. And that was the supervisor of food and nutrition services that you just heard from, Mr. Germain. He is a direct report to me. He was inadvertently left as a direct report to Mr. Wazlowski, but he does report to me much like Mr. Swift does. And he has a manager in his department, Mr. Wills, that is that we have included as well. It's not a new hire, it's not a new position. It just aligns with other managers such as transportation operations and maintenance. We included that. And we also updated Mr. Swift's title. It did include capital projects at one point. And we reflected it to be accurate. It is up for action this evening. I did have one request that did come in after this was shared with the board that I would like the board to consider as an amendment to the organizational chart with your approval, and that is the position of nurse manager. And I'm looking for her on the side of in curriculum. She's under, right, yeah. She actually, that's Mrs. Aiken, and she actually has been quite involved in the health curriculum and the health services. And so I would like the board to consider changing that from nurse manager to health manager. And that would be the only change.
So it's just a title change.
It's just a title change, it's not a position change, it is not a person change. It just as Mr. Swift's title more accurately reflects his role, this would more accurately reflect Aiken's role.
Okay, just a second, we need a motion on the floor for that.
Thank you.
There was a recommendation by the superintendent to accept the organizational chart with that minor change of title from nurse manager to health manager. Health services manager.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
Is there a motion to accept the chart with that minor terminology change?
Move to approve.
Okay, that's Rodney. A motion to approve. For a second?
Second, Matt.
Second from Matthew. Now we can have discussion.
So you're saying she would still be under services, correct?
Correct, no change there.
It would just say health service manager.
Correct.
Nurse manager.
Correct.
Any other questions?
I have just another quick question. Where it says STEM supervisor, it used to be supervisor mathematics and science. So the technology engineering, who currently do that? What does it fall under?
Well, it would have fallen under probably a number of people, Mr. Edwards, Mrs. Proudfoot, in the special education, and elementary education. We felt like, just as I mentioned for Ms. Bacon's position, STEM really encompassed a better reflection of what that position is actually doing. So it wasn't like we had somebody that supervised engineering and technology, but a STEM supervisor fit better with what we want positions to do and what the position is actually doing.
Any other questions, Lieutenant? Okay, there is a motion on the floor to accept the organizational chart. Those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay. I'm still concerned with, having one person, we have director of maintenance, operations, and facilities education. It used to be two separate entities, now put under the responsibility of one person. That was my concern, and it still is my concern.
The vote was 3-1, with 1 nay from Mrs. Rick.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the next item of action. That's the DFAB fund balance policy, which will be presented by Mrs. Schweitzer. Before we do that, Madam Superintendent, do you have a recommendation?
I do. I believe this is the second read for the fund balance policy, so I would recommend that we adopt it as it does follow the GASB recommendation for government entities to have a fund balance policy in place.
Is there a motion to accept the DFAB fund balance policy?
Rodney, I move to approve.
Second, Matt.
Second by Matthew. Now we can have discussion. You want to just bring us up to speed again, Ms. Schweitzer, as to what we are looking at, just the cliff notes on what we're doing?
Sure. In April, we've had quite a lot of events happening since April. But in a nutshell, the MOU situation that the Board of Education had in place with the Board of County Commissioners was dissolved, and as such, is the requirement that the Board of Education have its own fund balance policy that dictates the level that they should have in the reserve. So that's what this policy is trying to accomplish.
Yeah, we had this back in April, and then a lot of things happened, so we're just now getting back to it, but we do need to take action on tonight. Questions for Schweitzer about the fund balance policy?
No, and again, we were told that it was our auditors
Yeah, sure.
required that we do it,
I
so.
think it's something we have to do, so had to create one. Okay, there is a motion on the floor to accept. Those in favor of accepting the DFAB fund balance policy, saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. And it was 4-0.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Schweitzer.
Okay, next item of the facility educational facilities master plan, be presented by Mr. Wazlowski. Superintendent Baker, do you have a recommendation?
I do. As you're aware, last month, Mr. Wazlowski brought the educational facilities master plan to you. There were several questions that evening. We're happy to answer questions this evening, but I recommend that we do approve it so that we can move forward with its submission to the state.
Is there a motion to accept the educational facilities master plan as provided by the superintendent?
I move.
So moved by Monica. Is there a second? Seconded by Charlotte. We can now have discussion. Mr. Wazlowski, just want to give us, I know there was just one change, I think, from the original document.
Yeah, I believe we added 46A, I believe is the page number.
Yeah, northern middle, the northern middle.
The northern middle. Don't believe there was any other changes to the actual document.
No, I think not.
No, that particular time.
Right. Are there questions for Ms. Wazlowski?
I just have a quick question I was
Yeah.
thinking about. Like, when we look at our CIP, so normally things with CIP would be like in here, like in your footnotes on the side, or rated maybe
Right.
4 or something. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, like,
We would present the comprehensive plan as part of the guiding document throughout the CIP.
so this goes down the state once it's approved, correct?
Absolutely.
So, like, did they ever pull it down there? Yeah, like,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, stuff with, yeah, things,
Yeah,
like how they use it.
COVID thing, they're gonna change the commission procedure, so we're gonna do a conference call this week, talk how that's gonna go. But yes, it's very document representing Garrett County, yes,
So discuss, talk about, like, they'll look back at this, or.
yes, yes.
Other questions?
Could Rich address the question that came up on state rate capacity in the public comment?
I'm sorry, would you say that again, please?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good thing, Matt.
Yes,
Address the state rated capacity
Oh,
in
yeah.
public comment.
Okay, we've got it now, Matthew.
I know I've seen a document and a confirmation from, that lists Garrett County state rated capacity based on the new guidelines that were put out. Like, I couldn't put my hands on it in this quick time, that there was a procedure that was put out to redo the state rated capacity, went out to measure every classroom based on a new formula or that, and that's where that number came from. When I read the thing with Comar, I don't want to speculate, but I know Comar gives you some minimum, and you can always do more. I don't know. I have to do a little bit of research, but you know, I know it's. I can find that document and provide that guideline that was used to come up with the.
Yeah, it'd be interesting because I think
Yeah, it's a good.
it's been asked a couple of times, so we probably need to have a definitive answer for it.
I've seen that came to us. Verifying.
If we could get a copy
Yeah,
of
just see a
that,
copy of how we redid it.
I can provide it.
to see how that was.
Makes me think of one thing, state rated capacity. I believe Ms. Siebel had brought it up during facilities master plan. Can we not include or count, was there something about where we have the daycares or have that area, the areas attracted off? What was it? Do you remember, Ms. Siebel?
Well, exactly, came in a state to do that, and we never did it.
Yeah.
We didn't get it taken care of, and then that made our state rate, made our capacities off.
I just thought
So,
That would be a problem.
Princeton, all the places, so we do have the daycares. That was something that passed, given credit.
I'll go back and review.
Okay.
I would, before we do anything, you're gonna bring it back to the board for discussion, because I think there was a reason why. We were talking to Dr. Lever and we were talking with the state, why we didn't take that and take it out. I don't remember what the reason is, but I'd be able to find it for the board and,
Sure.
and update you on why that.
You could check with the.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
To see how, because that, my understanding, it wasn't new. I read some.
Yes, and it was brought up during the meeting, and then we said, okay, it'll be. I just thought, remember, wait a minute, would
Yeah, I
you?
thought it would help for sure.
Mhm.
Capacity. Right.
Other questions? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded that we accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the educational system. Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And it's a 4-0 vote in favor of the master plan.
Thank you, Mr.
And the next order of item is superintendent's budget approval. Ms. Schweitzer will provide us with answers to any questions we might have. We did spend a very long amount of time a couple weeks ago discussing it. Madam Superintendent, do you have a recommendation?
I was just gonna ask if you were gonna ask me if I had a recommendation, and I do, that you approve the superintendent's budget, which then would become the Board of Education budget for the FY 2021 operating.
There's been a recommendation of superintendent that the superintendent's proposed budget becomes the board's operating budget for FY 21. Is there a motion on the floor to accept the budget?
I think that's
Rodney makes a motion. And was that you, Matthew, seconding?
No, Matthew made it.
Yeah.
Matthew made the motion.
Either
Ron.
way.
You guys are gonna have to change your voices or something. There is a motion on the floor, and it's been seconded, to accept the budget. We can now have discussion. Are there questions for Mrs. Schweitzer concerning the budget?
I thought it's something I didn't ask weeks ago. I know we'd asked a year ago, when it come to budget, and the year before, did we put in any long-term
substitute positions, any positions filled. At this point, we're not budgeting for any long-term subs. Now, there may be an instance where we have a failed search, but it is not a plan to have any long-term subs budget. That's the question.
Just to reiterate for clarification, in case someone watching, so that we do understand the Schoology or Schoology, how to pronounce that? Schoology. The Schoology program, platform, I guess is the correct word that we're going to start using, be paid for the first 2 years through the CARES Act, through the ESSER funds of the CARES Act. It will become something that we'll have to make a part of our operating budget if we want to continue. Okay. Yeah, that question was asked during the discussion. Any other?
I had a comment. Budget is always hard for me. It seems like there's always so many needs in the system. And I appreciate the process that we have gone through this year. I appreciate getting the book and being able to go through, write our questions down, having them answered so the public can hear the answers also that we receive. And as I went through the budget book, and this was one of my questions, was that this budget, how does this budget address the first budget initiative that is listed on page 8, which is to dedicate resources to address discipline issues and mitigate student behaviors at all grade levels? And I was given an answer to that. I'm not saying I didn't get an answer, but I'm not saying that I felt like the answer was what I felt like we needed to hear as far as the behavior in the classrooms. Also, the fact that when it came back to us, when the budget came to us, there were 3 teachers cut and 2 instructional assistants. Now, neither am I saying that they were taken from the behavior program or anything, but instead of using those monies other places, I would have liked to have thought that maybe we could have added those 2 IAs to some ways to help with the behavior, have them in the classroom where teachers have students that are that they're having difficulty with. So I think if we're going to have that, we're going to have that as our first budget initiative, then we need to address that. I know that Mrs. Baker asked for a person to handle, to some way organize all the different stars. We got special ed, we've got a lot of things going on. We got the PBIS, and we've got people doing mental health for us now. And then as we look forward, we know that the situation we've been in is going to probably cause more problems than we had before the pandemic, just because that's the way it is. So I think, to me, it's very important that these things are taken care of in this budget. And I just at this time, I just don't feel like that has happened. And $250,000 is what those teachers saved by not filling those 5 positions. And last month I voted, last meeting, it wasn't last month, but it was last month.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, well, 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I did have a hard time and did decide not to vote for the $300,000, which was surplus in the budget to put toward the field. And so, I just have trouble going ahead with saying yes to a budget that I feel like has not met the needs of the system. Would have liked to have seen change.
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
And you're right, it is the first budget initiative because, as we've all said, it is an area that we need to continue to work on, and you're absolutely correct. There are a couple of points, though, I would like to make. The budget does include an additional behavior coach, and that is approved this evening on the consent agenda. So we did address it by reallocating some of the teachers that we did not replace to an additional behavior coach. We are also, have not abandoned the idea of the instructional assistants becoming, in the program that we had talked about, I believe RBT, correct? That we have not abandoned that. We have not had a specific line item because we're going to try and, because of COVID-19, we had so many other areas that we needed to focus on, but we have not abandoned it. And what we're planning to do is try and pilot some things that don't require a significant line item, budget item at this time. Next year, we hope to come back with a plan that would include some line items for that training and implementation. And finally, you'll see a posting tomorrow for, we've decided to, since we did not get the behavior supervisor into the budget, which I understand, we are going to use grant funding to have an administrator in residence, much like we did for the administrator in resident principals this past school year. That person will help us do the very thing I think that a couple of the board members talked about as far as building our own capacity for, so that we don't have to contract out, so that we can build our own capacity for our teachers and our behavior coaches, our school counselors to identify and address behaviors more quickly. So I think there are a number of things that we've done in addition to address that first budget initiative. We can't do everything, but I think we have done some additional steps to try and address it.
Well, I think the putting the coaches in and all of those things, there's still a period in there until all of this starts working, that people are asking for help. And I believe that through instructional assistants, people in the classroom, you know, what I hear is, I want to learn how to handle this myself, but at this point, until I'm trained, until I feel comfortable in the situation, I do need some additional help. And so I think, you know, we seem to continue to put money into people to help the people in the classroom through training and other things, and I believe that physical beings, more of those available for a while at least. Maybe you can lessen up on that. But to learn how to handle those situations, I think additional help is needed on maybe both ends of the spectrum. That's my concern.
Go ahead, comment. Did you want to comment?
There is also, at the middle school level, piloting a STARS program next year. So it's, as the students are getting older, we're implementing training and the program and starting in the middle school now too. So, you know, there are a lot of things that are going on in terms of the professional development as well, because we really only have 3 big initiatives for this coming year: the new reading series, behavior training, and then the learning management system to focus on. So I know that there was a long meeting today that I thankfully didn't have to be in on, but they were planning all of the professional development for the behavior. So it is a huge focus of the administrative team. It's taking a lot of our effort and our resources to be planning within the resources that we have. So we're shifting our time from other things that we do to focus on planning and preparing and making sure that the people we do have in our schools in front of our students are properly trained and adequately staffed.
Right, and that's what I want too. Mm-hmm. But initially, while those people are being given that help and all, I want them to feel like they are not going to get, you know, they're okay in their classroom, the kids in the classroom are okay, and that everything is being done to back them up that we can, until we can see these things that you're setting in place take and start working for people.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
When you just mentioned the middle school level of piloting the STARS program, was that both at Northern and Southern?
No, the student need is at Northern Middle School. So it will begin there, and then based upon need next year is what we're looking at.
And it is truly right now a pilot. We're not even certain that the name will continue to be a middle school STARS. They may choose a different name for middle school, or it might be middle school stars, but it's truly right now a pilot program. Until, much like we did with stars the first year when we piloted it at the elementary level.
So it will be the staff we already have then.
Positions that were
Correct,
reallocated
yes.
to that.
I think another thing, I'm sorry.
That's okay, you talk, because I have some questions.
I think another thing I think about is that we used to have a line item in the budget, which was non-public school programs, and it's still in there, but we've taken a lot of the money out of it because we're hoping to keep our kids here and not have to send them away. And I think that's a good idea. I think being in the community and all of that. But we need to realize that those monies that were going there are going to have to, some of them are going to have to come to here. Because we still have that situation happening. We still have children with those needs. And if wherever we're going to have the children at, that's where the money needs to be allocated, to be able to help. It's not like they went, those children are not here and don't need help. And possibly there's more of them coming into the system because of the lifestyle and things that we know of, now. So.
Yeah, I think the greatest unknown that we have now is which students will be in our system. Which students will be in our system come the first day of school, and what will our needs be? I totally agree with what you're saying in terms of needing more. But the principal always asks for more, whereas argue against less. The biggest need, and you touched on it, Allison, and I hope this is happening. I hope as we are looking at our behavioral issues, that, let me say this politically correct, that we're not buying a canned program that tells us how to deal with our behavior problems, but we're using our staff, our teachers, our IAs, our people who are there every day and see every day what goes on to formulate what our strategy is going to be, how we're going to attack it. Because I put all my confidence in those teachers who've been in those buildings for 10 and 20 and 30 years and 15 years and have seen students come through those buildings and know what's happening now. But in their minds, they know these are the things that could make a difference. But I just that I've got to fit myself in. And I hope that and I have all the confidence in the world that others have thought about this too. If we're going to do staff development, let's bring in the staff and say, what's the development we need? You tell us. And then let's go from there. So, I hope that's a part of the answer solution. Because I personally think that's the solution, is for our staff to have the confidence that we've built what we're going to do and we all believe in what we're going to do.
That's not easily achieved.
No, it's not.
I absolutely agree that I don't know if they would tell you that they feel like it's a canned program, but
well, we've all been given canned programs. Hey, listen, I remember Project Basic.
Sure, right. So. I don't see it that way, but point taken for sure.
Yeah. But between Title I and then the addition of Activity 294, we've spent way more than the $250,000 that we've cut from non-public. So it has to be a flexible program because the students we get their needs are, every single one of them has different needs. So,
and non-public placements are becoming fewer and far between. They're being more difficult to find good programs for our kids, alternative placements.
Monica said you had some questions.
Yeah, I do. When I was looking at our Strategic Facilities Committee, the report that the committee did, when I looked at the recommendations, like 2A, Security Festival Projects. When I looked at the 2B, it was disruptive behavior. And then the recommendation was fix up existing spaces and build new spaces due to their operating budget, allowing regular instructional programs to continue uninterrupted. And it said benefit, that was a benefit, and it said safe, controlled, calming spaces. So my question is, have we addressed any of this disruptive behavior through our operating budget? Like, I guess it'd be the maintenance part of it. Like for the calming spaces and things that the committee, it's dedicated in this budget here to do.
We already have.
We have,
Several schools
Yeah, last
that
year's
have.
budget, we did the grants bill, we did the work ourselves. And actually, we've had a conversation before about some things we might need to change at Broadford in terms of the space, based on what, Dr. Mags has a need for a student, so.
Well, I think a lot of that will also be addressed with our strategic plan that we take forward to the commissioners here in a couple of months in terms of how we expect to do those things. Because you're right.
Well, I'm
The
glad,
first
what
thing-
was,
yeah, no, you're 100%
everybody
correct.
we keep hearing in the community.
You're
Even
100%
the
correct.
comments, have you looked at the strategic facilities plan? Are you implementing any of it? So in there, it talks about the operating budget, so I'm asking.
And just like the, some of the other things that we've talked about this evening, as far as behavior and discipline, you have to be very careful, with the calm down spaces, that they are, again, that our teachers are trained and that that the room is being used correctly and appropriately for students. So yes, we have done several calming spaces, but there's that second part where we have to make sure that they are used appropriately.
And conversations have occurred with principals based upon the needs of their current students. Now, we do have money, we have flexibility in the funds in maintenance, that if we do need to put one in a school that we don't have it, or change, like a Broadford, we might have to change it a little bit, we do have the funds to be able to adjust that.
So the funds are there, but I guess my question is, do we have in our mind that we're going to at least work on a school for the common room or something in this budget? Like we said, we did Grantsville. We might have to make some changes to Broadford. Is there any other ones?
I would say based on student need, when we do return, when we see what we're going to need.
Like last year in the planned budget, the grants bill was in there because of the addition of the program. This year, we don't have any new programs that we actually put in my list of items for the budget that would say we have to add a room here, but then we get things as things materialize. So we would just use funds to make some small changes to the room at Broadford. I do believe we added a calm down room in accident last year with some different things. We just kind of use it as things, as it's made in the best interest, if this is made in the best interest of the children, we react and make the necessary changes in the facility.
And some principals have said they don't need one. At this point, they don't need one. So it's sort of
And
on
that could
hold.
change, that could absolutely change it based on student needs, school needs.
And then what Ms. Siebel had brought up about non-public placement, and then you had said, which we said before, like Salem is closed down now. There's less places. This was in August 2019. I cut a lot of things off paper. But this was interesting. Talked about, it said Baltimore Schools' mission to help students cope with trauma. It says Baltimore's new trauma-sensitive schools. You know, there might come a time when we might need, I'm not saying a whole school, but part of the school or building, like we might, it's more the trauma-sensitive, which makes me think of what Dr. Lauber said. It's almost like you need to teach these kids just how to live every day. Like to, I mean, not actually all their curriculum part of it, but just how to learn to live.
And our school counselors, our school psychologists do a good bit of that. We have actually done quite a bit of trauma-informed care, and trauma-sensitive work with our staff to understand that. Because you are correct. Right. It's very difficult, obviously, for students to learn if they're having ongoing trauma.
They're in survival mode, I guess is the word you might want to use when they come to school. It's not about learning, it's surviving. Sure. So there might come a time that that increases. And I have a concern.
Somebody have a question there?
Mrs. Baker, if I could just say really quickly too about our mind-body medicine initiative in our schools, and that we do have all of our nurses have gone through a training in mind-body medicine. So we are in a good place as far as going back in the fall and having extra tools in our toolbox in every single school.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
My other question is, Ms. Siebold had actually kind of said part of what I was thinking too. But we seen on there was some positions that won't be refilled, but she had stated that nobody lost their job. Most of the people have just retired, resigned.
Nutrition.
So we won't be refilling them. So no one's losing a job, which is good. But it was said last month that part of it would be, at middle school level, the 5th grade coming up was, smaller numbers of enrollment. So if I look at what we just approved, the facility master plan, I know it says enrollment historical 2019 projected 2020, 2029. If you look at right now for 5th grade, or 6th grade, look at 6th grade for 2020. We currently have 270 students. If you look at what we're going to have going across the line for 6th grade next year in 2021, it shows 290 students. So that looks like there's going to be 20 more students. I'm kind of confused.
The data you're looking at is Maryland Department of Planning data.
Even though it says Garrett County, okay.
Yes, that's the Maryland Department of Planning data. And what we looked at was our actual enrollment rolling forward.
Projection data.
Right, so that's projection. That's projected, and it's for system-wide. It was done before the pandemic. It was done before they knew that the Luke Mill was closing. There were lots of things that aren't part of that projection. Now, I'm not discounting what the Maryland Department of Planning does, but we looked at our exact numbers, rolled them forward, and did a variance within 5%.
So that would be on here, enrollment principal, that's the projection. So if this is a projection, so this has to be the accurate, right? Because it lists each school accent at Friendsville, Brandsville, Rock 40, and so on. Is that correct? On page 106, do you have your Mr. Rosati in front of you? It says based on 2019-2020 enrollment. So that is our enrollment now, as of
September 30th. September
yeah,
30th.
okay. So it's saying, let's see, 6th grade, we have 263 students in 6th grade. If you would look at 5th, which is what we have now, which would be the ones upcoming, and I realize you might have some come in, some leave. It says there's 278, so that's actually 5 more students. Is that correct? Am I looking at it right, Mr. Rosati?
But that's the entire system.
Yeah.
I realize what you're saying, but I'm just trying to understand, because we were so part of this, 2 positions in middle school because of our enrollment and decrease. I'm just trying to understand.
Right.
If this is what we're going by.
So one school was already overstaffed. The other school were right-sizing. So we're right-sizing them at the same time.
So it's not so much based on enrollment numbers.
Wasn't based on enrollment. Yes, it's based on enrollment in the south is declining. The enrollment in the north is also declining. Maybe not that exact year, but overall, when you take the mean of pre-K to 5th grade, they're overall smaller classes than 6th through 12th that are graduating. So, and then when you further break it down by north and south, south is declining at about 6%, and north is only declining about 3%. But when you're talking about 100 kids per grade, that's 3 kids. So you have to right size at a certain period of time where it makes sense for the system. So we've been at a point where we probably should have right-sized middle school 2 years ago, but we didn't have attrition. We didn't have any retirement. Now we do. We see the enrollment trend, and this was our recommendation.
So you're looking at, what you're describing is a trend, not just 5th grade moving into 6th grade. It is a trend throughout elementary moving to middle school, not just 5th grade moving into 6th.
But the current 5th grade in the southern end of the county is smaller than the current 6th grader. Now, it bumps up because you're going to have little blips, but overall, when you look at the grades together, we're getting smaller graduating classes, we're getting smaller overall classes.
Well, you have to go back to this is going to be an unusual year to deal with anything, because we just don't, we may have all 3,698 students, come to school. We may not, you know, we don't know. Well, I mean, half of those maybe would be one taught at home. So then we're gonna have to use that staff in a whole different way than we think we're gonna use it right now. Some people are gonna be teaching online, some people are gonna be teaching face to face, some are gonna be doing both. So it's really a difficult conversation right now for all of us, you know.
It is, but I said basically that some of the classes might just be larger than what they are now, is what will happen probably. I mean,
I don't think
truthfully,
that's
it's
very
gonna be-
incrementally, though,
Yeah.
because we've had long discussions with both principals, the Southern Middle School principal and the Northern Middle School principal, and both of them have no problem with managing this change, and
I think we're working on some strategies to make sure that we don't have.
It can't be larger if we're gonna social distance, first of all.
Yeah.
Well, right, but I'm just trying to think, if you eliminate
Yeah.
teachers, you might have, let's just say 15 kids. I mean, some kids have 20 some. So then you might have 3 classes they go into, so then you might have 6 minimum. And I'm just trying to,
Sure.
because I know some of the classes, honor classes, are pretty tight. There's a lot of kids in them.
Yeah, right.
And I know you can't dictate, you know, like if you would. I just had a question.
I think next year probably becomes more of our decision-making of what we want to do with our staffing. This year, it worries me how we're going to use our staffing more than how big the classes are or anything else.
So I guess you'd ask the parents that have to go back to work or are working, and they'll probably want the kids to go
Right,
to
I
school. Or you
agree.
have the ones that the parents might be home
Working
and
home
just have
anyway.
done.
Yeah.
They say, you're going to school.
Yeah,
They're going to have a
okay.
variety.
We heard somebody that works here in this building said their kids will be going to school no matter what.
Are we ready to hear?
Yes.
I think the 5th grade here would, in budget, the 6th graders, the one, 25.
So you're back at what, 106? I just shut it.
Yeah, but I think probably when the budget was done, we were looking, this is FY next year's budget, so these graders here would be rolled over.
Okay.
So there is a 185, goes to 149, trend then drops.
Okay, any other questions? Any questions from you guys at home?
The updated
Nope.
sheet was very nice.
Is this the new book?
All the changes.
I mean, is this, we take everything out of the old book and put this in the book? Thank you very much. Yeah, yeah.
that's what I did. I just have
You know, all of us know, and we all have questions, we'd all like to have more, and so on, but we also, I mean, I think we're all very appreciative of the work that has gone into the budget. It's not an easy process to try to
And as I say every year,
keep everybody happy.
It starts in September and October. It honestly, it is a year-long process to budget the following year. There's a tremendous amount of things taken into account, and the work Schweitzer has done is really true.
But I want to echo what you said, because you said a very valid point. Cheat sheet you gave us was invaluable. It really was. I mean, that led us through everything that was happening in that budget.
Ready to vote?
Okay, there is a motion on the floor and a second to adopt the proposed operating budget, FY '21 operating budget. First budget. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And I'm voting aye.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mrs. Schweitzer.
Okay, the last, or no, we will hear from our illustrious student. Last report.
How much to report on.
Just report on everything that's happening at both the schools.
After an unconventional fourth quarter, the school year is drawing to a close. Obviously, as Baker said, last school day is the 11th. And then, I just had something for the graduation ceremony, and although this is not how we expected our graduation ceremony to be when we first entered high school 4 years ago, I want to thank Ms. Baker and everyone else who made the ceremony possible. The experience across the stage with family members watching was Jim, given the circumstances, and I truly appreciate the effort that went into making the ceremony possible. Ready to see the virtual compilation. And that's all, I guess, the thing I want to say. Thank you all so much for we really want to. Thank you.
Well, thank you. As we said earlier, first of all, know where you'll be the second Tuesday of every month. Move to your computer, trying to figure out what we're doing. Whether but Katie, and, yeah, it's been a pleasure for all of us. Your help and you've been a pleasure to be around. We wish you nothing but the best. And I'm sure each of us will follow your career a long time, because you're going to be a special person out there and helping out.
Absolutely.
Thank you
for the kind words about graduation. I've told many people that I enjoyed meeting each family, the interactions, and I'm not sure I would want to do it exactly that way again. I would much prefer to have a room full of 1,000 people. But I also think we should give a shout out to the outline, the two principals, the secretaries, and all of those people that made the day, I guess, what it was, because a tremendous amount of work was into today by all of those folks as well. Cameraman, Mr. Price volunteered 3 days for Northern, Mr. Skipper, and several, his name escapes me, but the other Zach, somebody help me, the other Zach, did the photography. Kreischer, Mr. Kreischer. Sorry, Mr. Kreischer, if you're watching. But it was a team effort, and I can't wait to see the video. The students and the parents just as pleased as I was with the way it turned out. So thanks for your kind words, and we will miss you greatly. Want to hear all about Harvard? I think.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else want to say all right. Yeah, we'll miss you. We'll miss you.
Every day.
Every Tuesday, tune in.
Late night until ratification.
Yes, we do. Yeah. We have one more item of action, then we'll go back to executive. We still got to finish a couple things in executive yet. The ratification of contracts, and coming through the door is Dr. Madam Superintendent, do you have a recommendation?
I do. I do want to do them separately, the two bargaining groups. Okay. So I think the first bargaining group, I would like to recommend the ratification of the AFT, which is the head custodians and cafeteria worker contract for the next year.
Okay, the superintendent has recommended that we approve ratification of the AFT head custodian cafeteria workers contract for next year. Is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion, Matthew.
Matthew makes a motion to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Charlotte. You can now have discussion. Are there any questions for Dr. Wilderson concerning that contract? Hearing none. Those in favor of the motion as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. It is a 4-0 vote in favor of the ratified contract for the AFT. Superintendent Baker, do you have another recommendation?
I do. The next recommendation is to ratify the GASA, which is our Garrett County Administrators and Supervisors contract for the same fiscal year.
Okay, there is now a recommendation on the superintendent to approve the GASA contract, which is the Garrett County Administrator and Supervisors contract. Is there a motion to approve?
Amen.
So moved by Monica. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second, Matt.
Second by Charlotte. You guys missed that. That second. That was a classic second. Seconded by Charlotte. So, are there any questions for Dr. Wilderson? Hearing no questions. Those in favor of ratifying the GASA contract, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And it is a 4-0 vote in favor of the contract. Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson, for all that hard work. I know that's not an easy task to do, and
Just as I complimented Mrs. Schweitzer on the budget work, we have to compliment Dr. Wilderson on the, employee contract that has been ratified so far. It's a lot of work.
thank you. At this point in time, we are ending the public, session.